It is 6:30 on Tuesday, September 26th, and I'm calling this regularly scheduled meeting of the Carson City School Board to order. We'll begin with agenda item 1, which is adoption of the agenda as submitted for possible action. We have a motion by Trustee Walker and a second by Trustee Casiopo. Do we have any board discussion? Do we have any public comment on the motion to approve the agenda? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye, and the motion carries. Move on to agenda item 2, which is the flag salute. Please rise and join me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 3, which is the superintendent's report for information only. Mr. Fueling.
Thank you, President Crossman. So I want to be transparent with the board when I mess up. And I received my first detention of the year from Dr. Conley for being late to a meeting. So I just wanted you to be aware. If you hear anything, it's true. In much brighter news, just want to recognize Commander Meyer from the NJROTC program at Carson High School, getting recognized as a finalist in the Nevada Teacher of the Year program. This is the 6th consecutive year we have had a finalist in that program. And we have had, in the last 20 years, 4 teachers win Nevada Teacher of the Year. So, I feel like Commander Meyer has gotten a lot of accolades here recently, and just very well deserved, and very, very excited for him receiving that honor. Last item. Where'd it go? The governor and the Department of Education released their, I think it's a report, their new model for expectations with funding that has been put into education, and it's being called acing accountability. You may have seen that in a news release. It was in the Nevada Independent and on TV as well. And this is, if you recall, back right around the beginning of the year, I had mentioned that there were specific items that the state was going to be looking at in holding school districts accountable for how they're using these funds. And so this is kind of the final, but it hasn't changed much. But it comes down to what degree are districts effectively implementing reading and mathematics resources? To what degree are kinder through grade 3 students demonstrating progress towards mastery and literacy? To what degree are grades 4 through 8 students demonstrating growth and proficiency in mathematics? To what degree are high school graduates prepared for success in college or a career? To what degree do districts have the workforce to meet the needs of every student? And then kind of this one at the end that's a little bit different, but to what degree are districts using innovative solutions to meet the unique needs of their students? So, and that is one that districts actually have discretion over choosing what those are. So it's kind of a unique piece to this. It's not common for districts to have any say whatsoever in how we are held accountable in various ways, and there's many ways we are. So anyway, I wanted to share that. It was a release, I think, last Thursday afternoon. I think that went out. So that's big news, and we will digest that and move on with trying to make some of those things happen. Or all of them happen. And that is my report for today.
Thank you, Mr. Fueling. We'll go ahead and move on to agenda item 4, which is board reports and board member comments for information only. Do we have a representative from Carson High School here tonight? Oh, great. Please come and state your name for the record and turn on the microphone. And then I'll learn your name and be able to introduce you next time.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Paulina Perez Roque. I'm one out of the two school board representatives, but the other one, she's at the girls' varsity game. She's one of the players. So for right now, it's just gonna be me. This week it's our homecoming week, and for homecoming, it's Disney themed. We have a lot of Stuco has been working on a lot of um, events and dress up days for our school. To start Monday, we have Lemonade Mouth, which is wear yellow. And during lunch, we gave out lemonade. And after school, we had a bonfire and a club fair, which is a good opportunity for the clubs to express themselves and show students what they have to offer. Tuesday, we had White Lie, which is correlated with Hannah Montana. Um, One of the Stuco committees did a guess the song Kahoot at lunch and after school. Currently, we're doing a dress up karaoke for the kids and for all the students to participate. Wednesday, we did Twin Day, which is Live and Maddie. And at lunch is going to be a dodgeball in our small gym. And after school, it's going to be Wednesday Night Live here in the community center. And Thursday is going to be Hawaiian, which is Teen Beach Movie. And at lunch is going to be a ring toss. And after school, there's an ice cream social. And then finally Friday, there's a teacher-student swap day, which is Freaky Friday. And at lunch, there's going to be a prep rally. And then after school, there's going to be a homecoming parade and then the football game. And then for sports, on September 25th, there's going to be a girls golf game, and volleyball at SSHS. And then on the 26th of September, there's going to be a girls soccer game versus SSHS. And then the tennis girls at Douglas versus Douglas. And then the 27th is going to be boys soccer at Minogue. And then the 28th is going to be girls soccer at Minogue. And also the 28th is volleyball versus McQueen. And finally is going to be football versus Worcester. And that's it.
Thank you so much for your report. And also, I wanted to thank you for the new Student Council Instagram page. I saw that, and it's got some good information when I couldn't remember what time the bonfire ended.
Yeah.
You guys had the information there, so thanks.
Yeah. We made it so we can help everyone figure out what times because it's really useful for everyone.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone here from Pioneer High School to give us a report? Great, come on up and introduce yourself. Please turn on the microphone. It's okay, it'll turn green. We just have to have it for recording purposes.
I'm so sorry.
No problem.
Good evening, members of the board. I'm Sadie Fullerton, representing Pioneer Academy Student Leadership, and here are the Pioneer Academy activities. PHS has been very busy this month. 15 students went on the life-changing Rock Creek camping trip from September 11th to the 15th and had an amazing experience facing fears and pushing limits. The speech and debate team competed at McQueen Tournament last weekend, with Maggie Uzel taking 6th place in novice impromptu speaking. I was chosen by school staff for the senior spotlight for the month of September for being amazing. Friday morning, Pioneer held their first school activity, the 5th annual Panther Rise and Shine breakfast. Students came to school early for a pancake breakfast provided by leadership students and counselor Carrie Jordan. Students also worked on a suicide prevention poster while enjoying the sunrise with their teachers and classmates. Kristen Steinkraus has started a greenhouse club to help kids learn more about gardening and make good use of the greenhouse she and the students constructed after winning a grant last year. Picture Day was today, and all students and families will have free access to the photo files in the coming weeks via request to Mr. Jordan and Mrs. Schufelt. Thank you. That concludes the Pioneer activities and announcements.
Thank you, Sadie, and congratulations. I recognized your name, but I was double checking to see because your hair has changed. So you've gone blue. Looks great. Thank you. Do we have a report from the Nevada Association of School Boards? Trustee Varner.
Yes, I do. Last board meeting, I talked about the training we had in September. It was really excellent training, and I happen to sit on the Professional Development Committee, and the reviews are coming in from the people who attended. And I got to tell you, they've all been real positive. So it was really great training. I just want to mention that again. And for the pre-conference, or for the conference being held in December, planning is ongoing now. And they have a nationally ranked speaker coming in. And I think that training is going to be excellent. And they're also starting to do the preliminary planning for the professional development class that's going to be held in the first part of the year, possibly January in Reno. And it's also going to be really good training. It's Mergen Jennings is going to present the class, and I have something on here real quick. I had it pulled up here. But anyway, it's for engaging in effective workplaces and stuff like that. So I think it's going to be really effective training for board members to attend. So I'll keep informed as that comes along.
Thank you. And I think all of our trustees have let Renee know to make arrangements if we're planning to attend the annual conference.
Right.
If you haven't, contact her and let her know so she can get you registered.
Thank you. And that's my report for NASB.
Okay, sorry I jumped in on there.
That's all right.
Do you have a report for your schools?
I do. This morning I was able to visit Mrs. Raquetta at Boardwick Bray, and we had a real good conversation, and I wanted to thank her because she's in the middle of observations and she took the time out to meet with me. And we had a good discussion about the departmentalization that they're doing at the school this year. And she gave me a good rundown on that, and I appreciated that. And I also wanted to mention, this sounds kind of funny maybe, but I toured the new bathrooms there. And I got to tell you, whoever did that did an amazing job. They look really good. And, I was just really pleased to see such a fine job in the bathrooms there. Well, I hate to talk about bathrooms at the board meeting, but anyway, I thought it was important to mention because whoever did it did a great job. And I think it sounds like it's working out real well for the students there. And then she also wanted to thank all the families who came out for their back-to-school barbecue and parent data meetings. They had a great turnout and appreciate all of the support. And also, Boardwick's cookie dough fundraiser will be held October 2nd through October 16th. She wants everybody to be on the lookout for handouts coming home with students on Friday, as well as information that'll be in Parents Square. And this is their largest fundraising of the year, and they appreciate everybody's support. So if you need any cookie dough, please order from Boardwick. That's my report from Boardwick.
Thank you. Trustee Walker, do you have a report?
I have one for Fritz, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
And I think this one's important too. Mr. Brown, as everyone knows by now, school was designated as a 4-star school, which I think is cause for celebration, and I wanted to congratulate him and his staff there for that. But he says that he and the staff will stay humble and not brag that Fritz is a 4-star school. And he would like to thank all his staff for making that possible. And like I said, I wanted to congratulate him on that also, even though he's humble about it. He would also like to promote their PTO fundraiser and let everyone know that the holiday season will be here in a snap. So now is the time to get your Charleston wrapping paper, which they will be selling. So there again, if you need any wrapping paper for the upcoming Christmas season, please see them at Fritz. And that ends my report. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Trustee Walker, do you have a report?
So, like Superintendent Fueling, I'll probably be in detention because I didn't connect with Mr. Conley today. So I will report back at a future meeting anything great that's going on in Eagle Valley. I did want to mention last month I neglected at our state board meeting, AJ represented superintendents and he spoke about the importance of local control and really the many facets that go into the state board regulating the start time of schools at our high schools and the impacts it's going to have on communities and other levels. And so I just wanted to say that he represented our district well. He got a little passionate talking about the background, and when he got to the real punches of his written remarks, he got cut off. But timing is everything, Mr. Fueling. But I just wanted to say thank you and good job, because you did represent us well. And, like usual, I was proud of you.
Thank you. Trustee Walt.
Yes, so for Empire Elementary School, Mr. Tuttle stated that Empire Elementary School had an incredible turnout for their open house last Wednesday on the 20th. Hundreds of family members, the halls were filled with community partners, providing opportunities to serve their families. It was a great event. Mr. Tuttle would like to thank all the families and the community partners that attended. It was truly a well-attended opportunity at Empire. He would also like to especially thank Patricia Juarez, their new mental health professional, and Miriam Ocha, who is their new family involvement coordinator. They worked together to make that happen. And Empire Elementary School continues to work hard to make great things happen at Empire. And for Carson High School, Mr. Carstens stated that this is a very busy week, as we heard from the senior or the student council member who said that it is homecoming taking place. So evening activities are happening every day, ranging from bonfire to karaoke to the parade on Friday. CHS is also looking forward to their next early release. Previously, they had an avid trainer come in and work on high-yield instructional strategies that were in alignment with their current school goals. So they also implemented a brunch. This sounds awfully interesting. So I hope that the classified employees like this, because I do think that this sounds great. But they implemented a brunch period during the early release times where their entire certified staff is out amongst the kids, making all sorts of connections. And it has been a great start, and they are looking forward to continuing the positive atmosphere that they have created at CHS for their students.
Thank you for that report. Trustee Clapham.
Thank you. So from Ms. Crookshanks at Mark Twain Elementary, she says that they are working hard on their whole class and targeted reading interventions using the PRESS intervention system, which was provided by the state. They're continuing to work on proficiency skills in math, and they're beginning in ELA as well. Last Friday night, they had their fall carnival. Just many families attended and had fun. Next week, they'll be celebrating donuts and with deputies on October 4th from 7:30 to 8:30. And that's all I have from Mark Twain. And from Carson Middle School, Miss Robinson states that there's a back-to-school night tomorrow evening. Parents can get a snapshot of their child's day by going to each class with them. Class rotation begins at 6 p.m. However, the doors will open at 5:30 if any parent wants information on Infinite Campus, Parent Square, or any of the community partners. So students are encouraged to attend with their parents. That's all I have.
Thank you. Trustee Ramirez.
From Sealiger Elementary School, Miss Paula Sona reported that they completed the Fall Scholastic Book Fair. It was wildly successfully with the librarian, and forgive me if I mispronounce her name, Miss Fronapfel. She helped running the event. They brought in roughly about $13,570. And that money goes back directly into the school library for the students. She did clarify that not all the funding goes to them, but a good portion of it. So very good job on that. Next week is Week of Respect. The student leadership will be having some fun activities to add in addition to the dress-up days. And Pirate Club is up and running. This year they're doing it before school and only one grade level at a time, so the student-teacher ratio is ideal. And the student store called Pirate Prime is in full swing. Students have the chance to shop twice already for prices rewards. Some of them are choosing to save bigger ticket items like helping Miss Pryor to do announcements or having lunch with Miss Paula. And she did say that she already had the first luncheon with the 5th grader, and it was fabulous. I also want to thank AJ and Superintendent AJ Feeling and his staff for putting an amazing PLC meeting. It was a different structure, and I was very, very impressed to see how the district is collaborating with Western Nevada College to create that bridge of opportunities in the career technical education programs for our students. I think it's a wonderful way for our students to start thinking about career paths, and I think it will help them achieve their educational dreams. So good job on that.
Thank
And
you.
last but not least, I want to remind everyone about the Multilingual Learner Expo this coming Saturday from 9 to 12. I know that Dr. Scott already invited everyone at the last meeting, but I wanted to remind everyone, I think it's going to be a fabulous event. Having a National Teacher of the Year come and speak to our families in Carson City, I think it's going to be wonderful. And I think many of us have heard Ms. Juliana Urtube when she came to the NASB conference. She was amazing. So we're looking forward to her inspirational presentation. And that concludes my report.
Thank you so much. Trustee Cassiopol.
Hi, thank you. Sadie took care of the report I needed to make, so thank you for that. I just wanted to say that I'm coordinating with Principal Zona to schedule a meeting to go tour the school and talk to him and the teachers and whatnot, just to check in and hear about the things they're doing. So that's all I have.
Thank you very much. Dr. Ward from Fremont did not have a board report for tonight. She said there's nothing new going on. They've been doing great things. And I just wanted to give a shout out if you haven't started following it. I mentioned the Carson High School Student Council Instagram account, but there's also a Carson High School Athletics account. And sometimes the school district account does it, but they're doing a great job of highlighting what the sporting events are each week and the student athletes. And it just, it's a really great resource if you're interested. They also, I think, post to Facebook as well if you don't do Instagram and only do Facebook. The kids all do Instagram or Be Real, but, just to look into that. And that concludes agenda item 4. We'll go on to agenda item 5, which is association reports for discussion only. Do we have any tonight? Okay, I'm seeing heads shaking, so that's a no. We'll go ahead and move on to agenda item 6, which is public comment. Mrs. Cortez has informed me that we have no email public comment. Do we have anyone who's interested in making public comment tonight on any matter here? If not, I'm not going to read the whole paragraph if no one is looking like they're wanting to stand up. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment because we have no interest in it, and then I won't read that entire paragraph. And we'll go on to agenda item 7, which is discussion and possible action to approve proposed changes to CCSD Policy 817 Identification Badge, second reading for possible action. Ann Sear.
Good evening, President Crossman, trustees. So I'm happy to be with you this evening for the second reading of Policy 817, Identification Badge. You may recall 2 weeks ago when I was here that I had noted that there wasn't anything in the reg, which we're not reviewing this evening, regarding the importance of wearing your badge, but I did include the employee acknowledgement form in your packets this evening, so you'll see that they actually do sign an acknowledgement. So I think we pretty much have that covered. There were no recommended changes for the policy itself 2 weeks ago, so if you don't have any questions for me, I believe this item is good to go.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Ann. I move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees approve September 26, 2023 as a revised date for Policy 817, Identification Badge.
Second.
A motion by trustee Cassioppo and a second by trustee Ramirez. Do we have any further board discussion or comment? Seeing none, do we have any public comment on this matter? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye, and the motion is approved. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll move on to agenda item 8, which is discussion and possible action to select one representative for the following vacancies on the Carson City School District Family Life Advisory Committee. One parent representative, one teacher representative, one counselor representative, and one religious representative to serve a 3-year term, September 2023 to September 2026, on the CCSD Family Life Advisory Committee. For possible action, Sheila Story and Cheryl Macy.
Good evening. My name is Sheila Story, Chief Nurse for the school district and also the Chair for the Family Life Advisory Committee. Thank you, President Crossman and members of the board and our district officials. Tonight, we're excited. We have 5 candidates to help fulfill some of our positions. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to introduce each of them individually and break it up into 2 groups because we have 5 candidates and 4 chairs up here. So what I'd like to do is first have the parents who are wanting to be a parent member on the board, and then we'll go into the counselor and we'll go into the teacher, if that's all right with you. Okay, sorry. Okay, so the first individual I'd like to introduce is Kendra Jones. Kendra Jones has been on the board as a parent, and she's done an amazing job. And she has 4 children within the Carson City School District. She also submitted a letter of intent and a resume. The second parent individual, is Danielle Martin, and she has 3 children who attend the Carson City School District. She also gave a wonderful letter of intent and resume. And the third parent I would like to bring up is Jennifer Brewster. She has 5 children who attend our school district, and she also comes with a really nice resume and letter of intent. So I'll give you the opportunity to ask questions, and then we can discuss. Thank you.
Thank you. And we did receive your resumes and your letters of interest, and I will speak on behalf of the board because our board is always prepared. I'm sure everyone has read through those. Why don't we go ahead and start? We don't have any formal questions, but we should just be sure that we ask the same question to each. And so I would open it up for any of the trustees to ask a question at this time.
For each of you, though, I guess my question is, why do you want to serve? And why do you find that this committee is so important?
I can go first. So being a member of
Will
the
you
committee.
state your name?
Oh, sorry. My name is Kendra Jones. But being a member of the committee previously, I feel like we've made a lot of progress in making changes and being able to review things that were previously implemented that maybe needed to be updated. And I also was a case investigator for the sex offender registry for a good amount of time, about 6 years. And I kept seeing juveniles come across my desk over and over again. And I decided that I needed to be involved with doing something about it. So I think that having more stuff around consent is really where it's important to start getting education for our kids.
Yeah, if you want the same question, do you want to go to each person? to
Yeah, and then
answer?
the second part of that question, though, is why do you think that this committee is important for the school district to have?
Oh, I apologize.
Oh, that's right.
Kendra Jones for the record. I believe that this committee is important to be able to have the viewpoints of the community and all of the important things for education, for sex education to be brought forth and get different viewpoints, because I know that there's a spectrum from conservative to liberal, and finding somewhere in the middle for everyone.
Would you like to have each applicant answer those same questions, Trustee Walt? Okay. They might need reminding if you can do that.
To repeat? Okay, so why do you want to serve on this committee? And then the second part is, why do you think this committee is important for the school district to have?
My name is Danielle Martin. I want to serve on this committee because over the years in my career, as well as at home, I have realized the importance of just sexual health in general. I last year worked in the high school doing the sexual health classes and getting the surveys at the end. I was able to see kind of what the kids already knew and things like that. And I realized that there was a very large percentage of children in the high school, at least, that are afraid to talk to their parents, or their parents just don't talk to them about any kind of sexual health. And so it is, to me, it's very important to be able to have that information for them. And then I work with adults now, and I teach some classes to them, just health classes, but we bring up different sexual health at times. And the things that they don't know as adults is very concerning, just because of the idea that they don't know enough about diseases and things like that. And so just having that information, being able to be available to children is very important. So I feel like this committee is very important, because it does give a chance for people of all walks of life to really kind of work together to decide what is best for the kids when it comes to their sexual health, because everybody has their own opinions, and it's just really important to be able to be on that same page and work together to really get that information out to the children.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Brewster, for the record. The first question, why it's important for me personally to be on the committee, is that the question?
Yeah, so why do you want to serve on the committee?
I was ecstatic when I found out that this committee actually existed. To be a parent and have 5 kids in the Carson City School District, I don't come from a background of having those experiences, but I have 3 of them in high school. And so to be able to have a hand in understanding and being able to maybe have it, as some of the other representatives were saying, that just to be able to have an even representation of maybe a balance between that liberal and conservative direction. And just it's important to me because I want to be able to protect them. And one thing that is really, I think, overlooked a lot is the ability to convey to kids the difference between what they're having on their phones and access to unlimited with their little computers in their pockets, and being able to dispel some of the reality versus what they see and hear on TV and in media, and just to be able to cut through that and give them the actual truth. So.
And then lastly, why do you think it's important that the school district has this committee?
I think it's hugely important because it gives everybody in the community an opportunity to have a hand in what their kids are learning. They're going to be the future. And they have to know how to take care of themselves, and they have to know how to be protected, especially, I mean, this world is evolving like hand over fist, like we can't keep up with it. So I think it's hugely important, especially in a community like ours, that we actually have a say.
Thank you. Trustee Walker, did you raise your hand? Okay, go ahead.
So I guess, first of all, to all 3 of you, thank you for keeping us in business. So we appreciate that. You know, it was mentioned.
15 kids up here.
Well, it's true.
It's 12.
Laurel should be right there at the table too. So seriously, you know, it's been mentioned a few times about how political the issue is. And for whatever reason, it has become a political issue, and it is a very personal issue for families, obviously. And families opt in for participation in sex education in our district. My question for you is, because all of that is the noise, but as a district, what we're really worried about is the well-being of kids. And so what is the most important component of a sex education program that we need to make sure we are teaching our kids in this district? And all 3 of you could answer that, please.
Kendra Jones, for the record. So I think that serving on the committee for the last 3 years, we did a really good job of implementing things that were science-based and fact-based. And I would really like to be able to continue that. And I do think that it is good that every once in a while we would get the religious member to be able to give input on the religious aspect of it. But moving forward with it as a science-based program was really good.
I think honestly, the most important part is correct information. There's so much information out there that is incorrect that they can get from TikTok, that they can get from Instagram, that they can get from all these things. And I mean, I've had those conversations with my own kids of like, nope, that's not okay. Like, that's not what we do. And like, I'm very open and honest with my children of like, what is right and what is wrong and what is real and what is fake. But not everybody gets that. And so having that real information where they can come and they can feel safe talking about whatever it is they need to talk about when it comes to sexual health is very important for any kid of any age, really.
Jennifer Brewster, for the record. The most important component, I'd have to agree, just keeping the information fact-based and cutting through what they hear in the media and just being able to have a candid dialogue with them and saying, this is what it is. These are the natural consequences and these are your options to, widen up, give them an objective panel of options to be able to say, these are the options, these are their potential ups, these are potential downs, and that's what we want to present to them because we want to provide them with the most accurate information possible for their future.
And Ms. Brewster, just a follow-up question. So we have a member, you served on the committee, you've helped with the classes. Have you been involved at all in the process in the past?
No, this is my first time here.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Casiopo?
I'll ask an easy one. No, first of all, thank you all three for being interested. It's one of those committees where it's tough, decision by committees are always hard and you have to limit the number of people you have on a committee, but it's so important to get input from all our parents and stakeholders. So thank you for being involved. I think for me, it's important to give kids accurate information, and sometimes it's hard to, even for adults, to figure out where to get the accurate information. But I think what's also equally as important is I think we're doing a better job nationwide in education of not always talking to the students, but getting feedback from the students. And I don't know how many students, there are a number of students that are involved in, I believe, in the committee. There's one student representative, or do you? Sorry, I didn't mean to call you up, Cheryl, but.
We had one student last year. She graduated, and so we have another student who has submitted an application for this year, and we're hoping to get some more. So at this point, we only have one student.
Okay.
And that is Betsy Camp.
Okay, thank you. So my question is, what's your opinion on student involvement and not just talking to the students, but getting their perspective on these issues? Because, they come right or wrong, just like us. They have thoughts and opinions, and I'm kind of curious, what your thoughts are from that approach.
Andrew Jones for the record. When we lost our student representative to graduating this year, it was a sad, sad moment. She was amazing. Everybody loved her input. It was so great to be able to hear it from a student perspective and to be able to hear it from somebody that was in the trenches and hearing all of the things that they were hearing at the high school and being able to get that perspective. And it really put it into perspective for all of us to be able to give her better resources. And she was also in a space of being able to hear the presentations and to hear the curriculum. So she was able to tell us how that was impacting her. And I think it made us make better decisions on what things we approved and did not approve.
I think the children's opinions are extremely important. There's a lot of things, I mean, honestly, that I don't even know that is going on in the schools, right? Because I mean, it's been a while since I've been in school. And so knowing what they're seeing and how they're feeling and their perspectives of what they know about sex and everything else is really important when it comes to helping teach them about what it is that they need to know about. I mean, we could teach them about a whole line of curriculum, but they're going to get what they want out of it. And so knowing what they need is more important.
So with the student involvement, I love to hear from kids. I love that they would actually have a high school student on this committee. One of the biggest things having high school kids too is that I would love to see is student involvement from the aspect of how do we reach out to them and let them know that they have a safe space? How do we engage them and cause them to be able to, kind of open up and draw out in the classes? And I hope that that's something that the committee looks at too. That's important.
Do we have any other questions for these applicants? So this, correct me if I'm wrong, Mrs. Story, but this is, we only have one parent representative position open?
Sheila's Story, for the record, yes, that is correct. We currently have one parent position open. And what we do recommend and encourage that any individual who is here this evening and or any of you guys, you're always welcome to come and join in one of the meetings, listen in, and just see what we do and see the process of how we go about approving different materials for our school district. So whoever is chosen, I think it'll be awesome, but the other individuals who are not chosen, I'd really like to invite them to still continue to come to our meetings and be part of them and just learn the process and help us out.
Go ahead.
You know, the last time we had this discussion, we also kind of had the forecast. We knew we had another seat opening up this fall. Just because we have 3 great applicants, when is the next parent seat open?
I believe there's going to be another parent seat open next year along with the medical position.
Go ahead, Trustee Varner.
I don't really have a question, but these decisions are always very tough. Like Mr. Walker said, we have 3 great candidates here. And I think that we couldn't go wrong by choosing either or all of you if we could. But I just wanted to thank you for being willing to step up and take on such an important role for our school district and for the children. So I just wanted to express that I really appreciate it. And I always feel kind of bad about having to interview people who are willing to volunteer for a position. So just thank you, and thank you for your interest in this.
I would echo your words too. And thank you for your courage in coming to be interviewed in this setting, because I know that can be stressful, and we are so grateful for your interest in. Please follow up, because at this time we can only appoint one person to serve on the committee. But please continue to attend the meetings, learn what it is, and as more openings become available, that may be an avenue to another way to serve. Do we have anyone who's willing to make a motion for this? Go ahead.
So the motion reads like we were going to do them all at once. So are we going to do that? Like bring up all the candidates first and then do it all at once?
I think we can break it up because we've got 3 right here.
Okay.
Mr. Russell, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking if we're appointing a parent representative, we could just do a motion for the parent representative position and then one for the other positions.
So you can do it either way. You can break it up into 2 motions if you want. If you're going to vote and actually take action on your vote, you have to have public comment after each motion. You can also have the motion made and seconded, then bring up the other candidates, get another motion made and seconded, have public comment, and act on both of them.
So, I guess it would be whatever the board's interested in how you'd like to do it. To me, it makes sense to do the parent position now. And just to be clear for anyone who doesn't understand, the positions on the committee are set by Nevada statute. And so that's why there's a set number of parent representatives and a counselor and a teacher and a religious representative.
And just like we said, to keep participating whether or not you are the ones selected, because I think the most important piece is this is your committee. These are your children that we're providing information to. And so whether it's as a audience member giving feedback like we get public comment in our meetings, or somebody who's voting on those proposals, I mean, the most important thing to remember is, this is to support your children. And so wherever your participation lies, be participating, because we need that feedback.
I'm not sure. I'm thinking we should probably do the parent one now is what I'm leaning towards. Do you guys want to do a roll call? Does someone want to make a motion? Do we want to get a feel for where we're at? And I get the feeling nobody wants to go first.
So I just have to have it. This was the worst part of being on the Board of Supervisors, is when you had to go through this. So I do appreciate all of you for coming and applying, and most importantly, I commend you for your volunteerism. It is so hard finding volunteers today. So for you willing to do this and wanting to do this, I commend you totally and completely. Being new, to the board, and, meeting with Ms. Macy and knowing where the progress of this board is going, or this committee is going, I would like to make a motion to continue with Kendra Jones for this committee, but encourage the two of you to apply next year as well. I would also encourage you to be a voice at those. You may not be the vote, but your voice is always going to be heard at those committees. So I would really encourage you to be there. And the other reason that I am making this motion as well is because it is a 3-year term, and I know you showed up. So, yeah.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I would second that.
We have a motion and a motion by Trustee Walt and a second by Trustee Varner. Do we have any further discussion or comments among board members? Go ahead.
I just want to emphasize again that I think all three of you are very viable candidates, and I could easily support any of you. I think you're doing it for the right reasons. And so I do hope I see participation from the two not selected in the future with this and other district committees.
Thank you for that comment. Are there any other comments? Seeing none, is there any public comment on the motion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Aye. The motion, any opposed? Motion is approved. Thank you again for your participation and willingness to serve, and please know that you are welcome to attend the meetings, and Mrs. Story hopefully can send you emails of when they meet and when the meetings are held so that you can participate, if not as a voting member, but as a parent providing critically needed information and feedback. So thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Go ahead, Mrs. Story, and we'll have you bring up the other applicants.
Okay, Sheila Story for the record, Chief Nurse and Chair of the Family Life Advisory Committee. The other positions we have available that are currently open is for the counseling position, the teacher position, and the religious position. Currently, we have 2 applicants, one for the teacher and one for the counselor. Unfortunately, we have not yet received any input for the religious representative. So hopefully in the near future, we'll have an applicant who is willing and interested in pursuing that position on the committee.
Laurel and I had a brief conversation about this. What exactly are the requirements for somebody to fill that seat?
Which seat are you talking about?
The religious representative,
So I
just
did
so
re-
they know.
I did read in NRS that it does have to be within your profession and or your occupation to hold that position. Some of the individuals who have applied are very active within their church community, but unfortunately, it's not part of their profession and or their career to be on the committee.
I understand the reasoning for that, and it's also interesting because since my faith, every clergy member is a lay clergy, and has a profession outside of that. So that's an interesting distinction that they make. Though I understand it because there needs to be some qualifications for who could serve as a religious representative. Okay, let me ask the board. We have 2 applicants here. Do you want to give them a time to introduce and ask a couple questions to each of them? Okay.
So first we have Amanda Beer. She's going to be applying for the counseling position. And we have Ananda Campbell. She's going to be applying for the teacher position, and she has 2 students within the Carson City School District.
Do you want to start with questions, or do you guys want to just briefly introduce? Introduce yourself? Go ahead and introduce yourselves, and then we'll ask any questions that we have.
Good evening. My name is Amanda Beer. I am here tonight to interview for the position of the counseling representative. I do have a 5-year-old in kindergarten, and this is my first time applying for the board.
My name, my name is Ananda Campbell. I am a teacher librarian at Carson High School, 27 years in the district. And I have 2 students at Carson High School who went through the health curriculum last year. So it's an interesting perspective on that side as well. I have been experienced with co-teaching and supporting the health academic content standards for the last 15 plus years with Mrs. Lisa Schutte at Carson Middle School, and then with the freshman health classes at Carson High School the last 10 years as the research and analytical specialist for students doing evaluation and research with the class.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from board members? Trustee Walker.
So I would just ask you both the same question I asked the parents. What's the most important component that we need to make sure that our students are hearing for their health and well-being?
Amanda Beer, for the record. I feel like we need to start first. Students need to show up. They need to feel comfortable coming to the teachers, coming to the events, coming to the class, the room, whatever it may be. So for me, step 1 would be to engage students and have them feel comfortable or willing, or at least maybe interested enough to come down and ask questions and feel welcome.
Ananda Campbell, for the record. I feel that the students need to trust the information. Like they definitely know when adults are speaking to them and, just saying things that, are following a script. They need to know that the information they're receiving is accurate, research-based, scientific, factual information. They have access to cyber world of knowledge. It doesn't mean that all of that information is accurate. So one of our jobs is to teach them how to evaluate and analyze that information. So I feel it's very important that we are presenting factual information for the students, and that's one of the reasons that I'm passionate about this position.
Trustee Casiopo?
Again, thanks to both of you. I appreciate anybody, like one of the trustees said, anybody who's willing to volunteer. We're all pretty busy, so I think dedicating that extra time shows your commitment to the students, and we appreciate that. We've had, over the last few years, parents that have expressed concern. What would you what would you say to comfort of parents as to, the existence of the committee or the content that the committee looks at and approves? You get some parents that are very leery about the committee and what the function is. How do you put their mind at ease?
Amanda Beer, thank you for the question. So in this aspect, I think with parents, it's going to be along the same lines as children. They need to be, well, children, students, the academic population we're serving, they need to feel comfortable to come here, approach us, be able to talk about their needs and concerns, feeling in a comfortable atmosphere. First and foremost, I had read previously about information being transparent or access and all of these different things. And I feel as if a parent is interested, engaged, and wants to communicate, we can come to a mutual understanding of whatever the situation may be. I think the information being available in applicable locations is a wonderful start. Like we do have computers, all of the academics, it's there. I feel face-to-face and communicative, if we were able to get on the same page or maybe sit in a room, that could be beneficial to the group as masses. Thank you.
Ananda Campbell for the record. I think it's very similar to how we have conversations with students, is just open and honest communication. And I think if a parent comes to us as educators with concern about the curriculum, I thank them, number one, for being involved, because that means that they want to know what's going on. And they're looking to us as, a major part of their students' lives to how are you going to teach this? And oftentimes they don't know how to have these conversations at home with their own kids. My parent view of this is when my students the very first day, before they even started the units on family, reproduction, and sexual health, the permission slip went home. And so as a parent, I knew I had the ability to make the decision of whether or not I wanted my children to participate. I could also look at all the curriculum and all of the materials that were being used. So any questions that I had, I could answer them there. And then one thing that I really appreciated as a parent was the very first assignment was to go home and talk to your parents and ask them questions. And I found that having those conversations at night about, what they learned at school, and they may be learning science, factual-based information, but when it comes to ethics and values and morals, that was my job. And I got to find out what the facts that they were learning and then talk to them about what does our family believe and what's important to us, and spiritual and psychological and emotional decisions. Those are mine as a parent. And so any parent who comes to us with concerns, number one, thank them. And number two, encourage that they have these conversations at home and know that it's up to they make the final decision if their student participates in this or not.
Thank you both for your answers. Do we have any other questions from board members? Okay, go ahead, Trustee Ramirez.
So as you both know, our minority student population now is our majority in our district. How would you engage our minority parents to be part of these conversations that are taking place in this committee?
Thank you for the question, Ms. Ramirez. I feel this would be a situation to have the parents come and find out what their expectations are. Culturally, at home, religious, all of the different thought processes, and see what they're wanting or needing, being open to their ideas, their cultures, bringing in information or different outside resources to maybe help with, populations, questions, answers, maybe different ways of even phrasing certain things that may not come across correctly. So I think in regards to that, it would be a community effort to not only engage the parent population, the community population, and representatives, but it would be a good learning process and helpful, I believe, as well, for not the minority or majority, but everyone included. Thank you.
Ananda Campbell for the record. Thank you so much for that question. I think that number one, inviting, but it's more than inviting, it's engaging parents of various cultural backgrounds. Carson City is more diverse now than it ever has been. And I think so often the first go-to is engaging maybe multilingual students. So my first thing, if I would like to involve Leticia Servin at the high school in particular, but there are family engagement people at every site. I just want to give a shout out to Leticia though, because she is magic with these parents. Just last night, very late at night, she had the largest parent turnout that I have seen for a very long time. And she gathers these parents in and they trust her. And she is a great resource for me because although I wish I was fluent in Spanish, I am not. And I try my best, but not only is it the language, but also the culture. And so I say so many of our students are Latino, but we do have students of other cultures and backgrounds and religious backgrounds. And so we need to just make sure we're aware of that. And if parents are coming to us with questions, or if they don't feel like comfortable going to the school, I think this committee is so important because it is a public meeting. And I invite any of these parents to come in because we don't know what we don't know. And if, I am recommending something, I want to make sure that I have feedback from parents of varying backgrounds.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from board members? Trustee Varner.
The permission slips that go home for the students to take to the parents, are they in both English and Spanish? I see Sheila shaking her head yes. So. And they would also then be able to opt out or opt in. Is that correct? Whether they're Hispanic or non-Hispanic. Okay, thank you.
I just am guessing that we also provide those permission slips in the language that is spoken in the home. If it's not Spanish or English, we probably, Sheila, do we provide that consent form in whatever language is spoken in the home?
Sheila Story, for the record, that is a very good question. We currently have it in Spanish and English, but in regards to other languages that are spoken, of course, we can translate it. How we done that? No, we have not. But if it does need to be done, we're more than happy to have it translated. We just have to find the resource.
Trustee Walker.
And I guess like this conversation's important, but it's also important to remember that we're building a system for the community. And so certainly we need broad input from all of the members of our community, but it's not like there's a Latino sex education program and a Caucasian and you know what I'm saying? We have to have one really strong system for all of our youth that parents are able to trust and make that decision. And like Ananda said so well, we teach the facts, the families, they teach the morals and what it means and some of those choices. And so I think that even though we certainly want that broad appeal, I just would hate for people to think that there's like separate based on race or ethnic background or religion. We have a system, and it is a strong system based in facts and in support of our students.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments or questions, or are we ready to entertain a motion? Or go ahead, Trustee Walt.
Well, Miss Story's right there. So what is for the counselor position? What is the qualification?
They have to be a licensed or certified type of counselor. And I do know that Mrs. Beer is a marriage and family therapist.
It is or is studying to be? Right. So that's what I was looking at, and I didn't know if that met the qualifications.
I believe so. As far as the state qualifications, I am also not 100% sure. I am in my second year of marriage family therapy, rolling into my intern, which is pretty exciting. So 1 year after that, then I will be well licensed, and 2 years into my practicum.
So with that, I didn't know then if we could just make a motion, and unless you know the answer.
Can
to
I
be
just
true.
clarify
Yes.
that the language is 4 representatives, 1 from each of 4 of the following professions or occupations? No.
So the profession though, because and I'm just making sure that we're not going, because it says the profession is that you were a director of operations for Serenity Medical or Mental Health, but you aren't any longer. So I'm not sure what the profession is, or if we're just a full-time student, not just, but a full-time student.
Absolutely. So currently, I was director of operations at Serenity Mental Health. I left there February of 2023. Unfortunately, I was pulled for medical reasons, so that was pretty devastating. I am now home with my 2 kiddos, so full-time with my son, daughter, also master's full-time. My background, I graduated GoPac UNR with nutrition dietetics. But as far as the profession goes, currently I am home with my kiddos only as a full-time student.
So I
Well,
guess the question
yeah.
for me maybe is to Ryan.
Maybe our question goes
splitting
to
hairs,
Mr.
or-
Ryan.
Yeah, I think the spirit, I'm about to practice my profession. I think the spirit of the statute is to make best efforts to find people with the input and the perspective in education. I think if there's a concern that the qualification for the counseling in particular is not there, you can make the motion subject to further research. But as I looked at the resume and read the statute, I think you guys would be perfectly within your rights to a point.
Okay. If someone's ready, we can entertain a motion.
All right, so I move, oops.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Okay.
I'm sorry. I'll make the motion. I move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees approve Anana Campbell as a representative as a teacher and Amanda Beers as a counselor representative to serve on the CCSD Family Life Advisory Committee for a 3-year term, September 2023 to September 2026.
We have a motion by trustee Varner and a second by trustee Walker. Do we have any further comments or discussions from the board? Do we have any public comment? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion is approved. Congratulations, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. I really appreciate your willingness to come and do it in this format. I know it's a tough format to interview.
Thank you
in,
so much.
Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 9. I have my notes covering up the numbers, so I had to look extra hard. Agenda item 9, discussion on proposed changes to CCSD policy 525, student conduct and discipline, first reading for discussion only. Tasha Fusan, and I see Ann Alexander is here with us.
Thank you. President Crossman, yes, I've invited Ann Alexander to come and co-present with me. Most of you know Ann. She's an attorney who has worked with our district for many, many, many years now, supporting us in special education issues, as well as also helping me over the past 3 legislative terms to update our policies and regulations around discipline and bullying and cyberbullying. So our first item for this evening is to take a look at Policy 525. The last time we updated Policy 525 was actually in 2016. As you know, most of the time our policies are more of like a position statement. And so even though we've had changes to state law in the last 3 sessions when it came to behavior, there wasn't really anything substantial that needed to be reviewed. But since we are now on our third iteration of Regulation 525, I thought it would be timely for us to take a look at Policy 525 and make sure it was still in alignment with the position of the board. There are a few minor changes. One, Ms. Renee did take and of course update our language when it comes to referring to the board as the Carson City School District Board of Trustees. So that's just that, the way we now write our policies. We did correct multi-tiered systems of support. It was in the existing policy, it said multi-tiered systems of instructional support. So being that our MTSS system addresses both behavior and instruction as well as mental health. So that was just an update to have that consistent with MTSS as a whole. And then also really the changes that we've seen over the past couple sessions, but most recently, the 2023 session was to make sure that there was an emphasis on restorative practices. So we added a statement in there, including the appropriate implementation of strategies consistent with principles of restorative justice as set forth in state law. So those were the rationale for those minor tweaks. We did, again, there was another statement added in there, just that school administrators are authorized to modify implementation of those guidelines. We added consistent with requirements of state laws just for clarity's sake. But those are the minor changes right now that we're proposing to the policy. As you can tell, it doesn't really change content, really. It's just, again, making sure that it was still in alignment with more of the work that we've done in the regulation. And just time to refresh it a bit. So
I do have a question, and I'm just remembering during the legislative session, I think there was some discussion between it being called restorative justice or restorative practices. Did they end up settling on one of them, and should we use whichever one they ended up settling on in our policy?
So restorative practices are part of restorative justice. The practices themselves are the types of interventions and approaches that we utilize within restorative justice. So you do tend to see those interchangeable often, but in reality, the practices themselves are simply the strategies that we use.
Do you have any other questions from board members on this? Okay, this is discussion only, so if there are no further questions, we can move on to agenda item 10, which is discussion on proposed changes to CCSD Regulation 525, student conduct and discipline, for discussion only.
Thank you, President Crossman. Tasha Fuson for the record. And this particular one, I am literally going to turn this directly over to Anne for her to talk to you about all the changes in state law and the proposed changes in our regulation. I do want you to know that we discussed as Anne was making some of our changes, not tracking the changes and really just doing a rewrite. So you do have in your packet the regulation as it exists today, and then a whole clean copy of the changes. It just, even that was not changed. There was resequencing of different information. So it just got really messy, to be honest with you. And we thought it would be much clearer for you and for our community to be able to see the two different ones without the red marks through everything. So I'm going to turn that over to Anne to talk about the major changes.
President Crossman and trustees, it's always a pleasure to be in Carson City School District. I am Ann Alexander, an attorney at law. I am a consultant to the superintendent's office. That's what I have dubbed my title to be for this kind of work that I'm doing with Tasha and on behalf of the district. And I want to add one other remark about the policy change. As many of you know who have worked with me as I've defended the district in litigation before, I'm often called upon to defend the district's actions with respect to its policies. And it's always useful for me to be able to say, this is a school district that updates its policies as necessary when there have been such dramatic changes in state law as there have been around student discipline. So I add that for your consideration as you consider to think about item number 6, item number 9 on the agenda. So some of you will remember that in 2019, significant changes were made in state law to the student discipline provisions, with rare exceptions for the first time in our history as a state, with rare exceptions, suspending a child out of school, expelling a child, or permanently expelling a child under the age of 11 was prohibited for the first time in state law. There were a couple of exceptions. One was that any student at any age was required by state law to be expelled for the first offense of being in possession of a firearm or a dangerous weapon. And state law required that such students at any age be permanently expelled for the second offense of being in possession of a firearm or a dangerous weapon. The second exception that existed as of July 2019 going forward was that a school was permitted under state law to come to you to ask for authority to proceed to permanently expel a child under the age of 11 in extraordinary circumstances where the misconduct would call for such an extraordinary removal, actually. The revisions that were put into place in state law at that time included the emphasis on restorative justice in the implementation of principles of restorative justice. And those principles were designed to encourage students to focus on the understanding the harm that their misconduct causes, as well as making restoration or providing remedy for engaging in misconduct. And that law also, for the first time, required that school boards by state statute actually approve some expulsions and permanent expulsions of students for a kind of a short list of serious misconduct. So that statute brought into the world your role in having to approve some of those removals. There were some changes made in 2021, but not very many. That core set of principles remained in effect. Generally, we were not permitted to suspend, expel, or permanently expel any child under the age of 11, except for that possession of firearms or dangerous weapons. And then in 2023, the legislature made a number of significant amendments to state law. I don't know whether or not any of you had an opportunity to go to listen to some of the debate around this issue, but I think the state legislature heard a couple of things. One was that there were significant concerns being raised following a couple of tragic incidents where teachers were assaulted by students. A second group of voices that our legislature heard was the voices of your school administrators saying, we need some more limited authority for some other very serious misconduct besides just possession of a firearm or a dangerous weapon, and some limited authority to remove kids from school through out-of-school suspension, expulsion, or in rare circumstances, permanent expulsion for a broader group of serious misconduct. And I believe the legislature also heard that it's cumbersome for a school district to have to involve a school board in ratifying and approving some of those kinds of decisions when they're made in the course of administering discipline already in accordance with your policies and with your regulations. So hearing all of those voices, and I think electing a governor for whom this was also a campaign issue, an issue of great importance to our current governor. The state legislature, in a bipartisan way, responded to all of those concerns. And what we ended up with was some new authority to suspend, expel, or permanently expel a longer list of what I call serious misconduct. So state law now permits at any age, but different kinds of removals depending on the age of the child, in 7 different categories of misconduct. An old category that existed but didn't have authority beneath age 11 is a student who sells or distributes a controlled substance. Second, a student who commits a battery against a school employee. A third category, which is now new, a student who commits a battery against a school employee with the intent to result in bodily injury. Fourth, a student who poses a continuing danger to persons or property or an ongoing threat of disrupting the academic process. I think that item spoke to many concerns raised by administrators about some serious threatening kinds of conduct and posing physical danger to other students beyond just battery to a school employee. The fifth is a student in possession of a dangerous weapon other than a firearm. So for the first time, the state law now separates out possession of a dangerous weapon from possession of a firearm, and you'll see why in a moment. And then the 7th is a student who's deemed a habitual discipline problem. And that definition has been in our law since the 1990s. So now what happens is that administrators, only in accordance with the procedural protections that are laid out in this regulation to afford students due process, whether they're being suspended for a short period of time or a longer period of time or expelled or permanently expelled. But that authority in those 7 categories of misconduct now permits some level of removal for children who are under the age of 11. There is no longer by state statute any requirement for the Board of Trustees to have to approve something like a 10-day suspension. So that your role has now been backed out of any kind of necessary approval for these actions. There are now 2 instances where some kind of removal is required, except for kids under the age of 6 in one case, 7 in another. And there it's optional. But for students found in possession of a firearm or students who have committed a battery against a school employee with an intent to result in bodily injury, both of those categories now require some level of removal for the older students. Suspension is permissible for the youngest of our kids, ages, I think, 7 and under for one of those categories, under 6 for the other. So suspension is optional, not mandated, but for older kids, some level of removal is required. There is a requirement, since for the first time, Mr. Superintendent, there is approval to suspend students who are under the age of 6 in those 7 categories of misconduct. The statute requires that the superintendent approve if there is any movement toward suspending a child that young, that the superintendent's eyeballs will be on that decision. There is also a limitation on the number of days for which a student who's experiencing homelessness or who is in foster care can be removed. And we're still waiting for the Legislative Counsel Bureau to reconcile 2 different bills that were passed before we're confident that we have all of the information necessary to understand what's permitted and what is not in terms of removing those students. And we'll ask for some additional clarification if it's not clear on its face when the actual codified statute comes out, because we were trying to reconcile 2 different bills that were passed that didn't always say the same thing. One other change that happened is that in 2019, there was a limitation imposed on the number of days that a student with an IEP could be suspended for misconduct. And that was a 5-day limitation per each instance of misconduct for a student who had an IEP. Student could be expelled, student could be a permanent expelled, but for a suspension, it had to be a short one. In 2023, the legislature increased that to be a 10-day removal, a 10-day suspension that's permissible for students with IEPs. That would give both parents time to position themselves if they wanted to challenge a proposal to remove a child for a longer period of time. They could marshal some resources, come to a manifestation determination meeting and that sort of stuff in order for everyone to have time to look carefully if we were looking at proposing perhaps an expulsion of a child with an IEP. And so that was a positive change, I think, in the statute that helps everyone get best prepared to process those questions. So for all of those reasons, we ended up being unable to do a very easy track changes on cut and replace because everything about those statutory definitions, which used to be 4, has now grown to 7, has different requirements at different ages for what's permissible, caused us to just try to take a clean shot at revising all of the language to make it just completely consistent with statute. And that is the sum total of what we did. The procedural protections in place for due process for students and families remain the same, and you have a robust set of procedural protections already in your regulation that is entirely useful for families and students, defensible for the school district should we ever be challenged with having made a discipline decision according to our due process procedures. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that very thorough explanation. Do we have any questions from board members? Trustee Walker.
So I just have to say, every year we go through your training for aversives. And so it's so weird to hear you talking about something else right now. Because, this is the beginning of our school year, so I've heard your PowerPoint 100 times by now. I just want to, I think these changes were necessary. I think for anybody who works in the schools, it's been impossible the last few years. And so I think these changes are a great thing, and I really appreciate your guidance and working with the district and helping us make heads and tails of these changes and put policies in place that are going to help support our schools and our students. So thank you.
Most welcome.
Trustee Varner.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you also. It was a very well-written document. I went through it very thoroughly, looking for something, and truly I couldn't find anything. I think it's obvious you guys put a lot of work into this, and I think it mirrors the Nevada Revised Statute very well. And just thank you for such a good job and for your great presentation.
Go ahead, Trustee Casiopo. Sorry, Molly.
Sorry. Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting. I have a question. I read these things all the time, but recently I was asked to look into something for somebody in a different district, so I'm intrigued by all this. But my question here is, under permanent expulsion defined, Section 1, it says, except as otherwise provided in subparagraph 2, without the possibility of returning to school in which the student is currently enrolled or another public school within the district. And that says within the district, but then if you go to Section 12, the NRS states that if you're permanently expelled, you can't go to any public school within the state. Should we change that language instead of saying within the district to reference Section 12, or are we okay leaving it the way it is?
So Trustee Casiopo, I can see that you're looking at the one that's stamped current.
Yeah.
And that is the one that has been changed. If you go further in your packet, you'll see draft, and you'll see the changes that are made there.
I'm sorry. So did we make that change, or is that still there? Sorry about that.
Sorry, I was checking on I was, peeking over on your papers.
No, I appreciate that.
It's interesting, Trustee Castopo, your comment, because one of the changes that we've discussed in state law is really the shift in the state's intent to make sure that we don't permanently write off a student, if you will, and say, okay, even if you were permanently expelled from a specific school, districts still have a requirement to provide educational services and some form of programming for the student. In our district, we typically, in the past, have served our long-term suspended and or expelled students through online programming.
Right.
This year is the first year we actually have a classroom set up with a teacher and a instructional support assistant over at Student Support Services for our long-term suspended students. We actually have 3 students that are assigned to that program currently. What we found is obviously if we long-term suspend or expel kids without having a place for them to show up, they simply don't engage in education. So we made a commitment this year to actually create a location with a teacher and a support staff member so that we can make sure that the students are physically engaged and instructionally engaged in education. So that's going quite well so far, but that has actually been a change in state law. I don't know if you want to speak to that, Ann, but that was one of the shifts where within state law, they specifically address the fact that districts are required to provide either solely on their own or in conjunction in partnership with other surrounding districts, a service, a way to educate ongoing or educate those students. So they're not just
No, and I understand that, and I am not disputing that at all. My question, and of course, now that I'm looking at the other one, I can't find it, so maybe it's covered. But if we're referencing that, a student can't go to any other school within the district, and another section is saying the NRS says they can't go to any other in-person public school within the state, should we be consistent, or is that not a concern? We address it somewhere else?
And I'll speak to what I think you're talking about. And I think it's at the very end of the regulation where there is a reference made to another part of the NRS that talks about if a student has been suspended elsewhere, or it could be on page 16 in Roman numeral 11.
Okay, and I do apologize, because when
Yeah.
I first looked at it, I looked at this one stamped current,
Yeah,
and I
but-
was reading page 8, and then I was reading page
Yeah.
afterwards.
Yeah,
Okay,
right.
right. Okay. Okay, and that's fine.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to make sure we're consistent and we're not, I hate for someone to read it and go, oh, I can call another district. I just wanted to make it clear to everybody.
And I appreciate that. And I think one thing we might do is, rather than just saying, and I'm talking about 16, rather than simply saying, except as otherwise provided in 3924675, is for us to lay out more clearly what those exceptions are.
Yeah, and that might be helpful.
Yes,
Because
yes.
I know unfortunately for parents that might find themselves in this situation.
Yes.
It's confusing and probably a little traumatic for them.
Yes,
So just clarity would help, that's all.
understood?
And I appreciate that. Thank you very
Yes.
much.
I knew exactly what section you were talking about.
I'm sure you did.
Do we have any other questions? Trustee Walt?
Yes, thank you, and thank you for all the work that you put on this. It was very well read. So on page 5, section number 7, general provisions, I see that number 3 has been added. So it's added language from the current regulation to enroll. So it says enroll in a program of alternative education provided by the school district in which the pupils reside. Carson City School District shall alone or through a partnership with other school districts provide a program. Which program do we have, or would we be referring to another school district?
So that is what that's the program I was just referring to that we have at Student Support Services. Levi Grabo is currently the teacher that we've hired for that program, and then there's an instructional support aide in there to help with the programming. So that's how that student support services in a classroom on that campus. So it is actually for any of our students who are long-term suspended or expelled or even permanently expelled. Again, to give them a location to actually attend. We are waiting for some clarification as well about whether or not our previous model of serving those students on online education with a teacher of record to support them would actually meet that need, or whether or not we have to have a physical in-person location. But currently we've got it covered both ways. So we do not do that in partnership with other districts. We have that program within our district to serve our students.
And what is its capacity?
In terms of numbers of students, I would say we probably don't want to put more than 15 students in the space, just for the sake of the fact that we are serving students of all grade levels, and they're all on different subject areas and space-wise. But currently we have 3 students. We did take a look at data-wise. If we would have served all of our students who last year were assigned in long-term suspensions and or expulsion, we have not permanently expelled, I think, but maybe 2 students from our district in the time that I've been in this role. So that's a rare occasion. But for a long-term suspension or expulsion, I think at any point in time last year, which was a very busy year, not quite as busy as it was the previous year, but I think we only had 6 kids out at one point in time on a long-term suspension. So I think the one classroom with the 2 teachers, or the teacher and the instructional support aide, would be sufficient meeting the needs of our district.
Okay. And then below that, when we discuss the homeless students or the students of foster care, no more than 5 days. So did that change from 1 day to 5 days from the NRS? And then if the 2 bills, when they become codified, would you be bringing this back if those days changed, the amount of days changed?
We will bring it back if the number of days changes.
So if you recall previous legislation, as Ann had stated, that there was a restriction on the number of days for a student with a disability to be suspended. I think they modeled this after that, but then they ended up changing that piece. So that's where there's just some interesting back and forth between those 2 pieces of legislation. So yes, currently we are practicing with the 5 days, and our sites have been trained, and actually came in and did training both for our principal group as well as our vice principal and dean group on the changes to state law. So we are currently practicing as this regulation is stated.
I'm just curious, if a student is expelled long-term or expelled permanently, if they're in their junior or senior year and they're involved in this program, can they still graduate with a high school diploma?
So our current practice is yes. We do work with each individual student. So one case that we had last year, we did have the student work with adult education. The student was on a path for an adult ed diploma. So although the student was permanently expelled from our school sites here, so the 2 high schools, we couldn't send the student to either Pioneer or Carson High, but we did work with Sam Santello at that point in time, the Director of Adult Education, so that we could provide online learning for the student, and then we did award that student a adult high school diploma. So we do try to take individual cases by case, and our intent is always to, whenever possible, make sure that student can graduate. So that's what we work towards.
Thank you. I think it's very important for a student to have a high school diploma as they go out in the workforce. Thank you.
Tasha, just I'm curious, do we provide transportation to those students, or do the parents bring them to the school?
So we will make arrangements to help provide transportation. Cherie Fletcher, our Director of Transportation, was very flexible with us this year. One of our students, we did offer the family to pick the student up, drop the student at Carson Middle, have the student walk over. So again, we're lucky because we are a smaller community and we have very caring individuals in all these different areas that are willing to come to the table to try to come up with a plan to help that student. So currently, 2 of our students are brought by parents. One of them is able to walk, but we did offer transportation, then didn't need transportation. So we will just work that out with the students as the need arises.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Thank you again for your hard work on this and for making sense of two different bills that went through and both got passed. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
We'll move on to agenda item 11, which is report on the multi-tiered system of supports, MTSS program in the Carson City School District to include implementation of academic, behavioral, and social emotional supports, introduction to the District Intervention Assistance Team, DIAT, and rollout of interventionists driven by data within the MTSS framework. For discussion only, Christine Perkins and Stephanie Keating.
Good evening, President Crossman and members of the board. Christy Perkins for the record. I'm the Director of Grants and Special Projects, and the district rollout of MTSS, multi-tier systems of support, is one of our special projects that we are working on. I'm thrilled to be here with Miss Stephanie Keating. I know she was introduced to the board a few months ago. She's joining us from a different district with a wealth of experience and knowledge in MTSS system and district-wide system implementation, a background in applied behavior analysis. And we've heard from our sites and our teachers and our administrators that there was a need to continue to support these efforts and make sure that students are able to participate in their education and that the classroom environment is supportive and functional. And I'm just so happy to have Stephanie join us here today. We'll be doing the presentation together.
Great. Good evening. My name is Stephanie Keating, MTSS coordinator. On your screen, I'm going to orient you to the MTSS framework. It is best viewed in a triangle format. So you see the big green triangle, and this is our universal instruction. So this is for all students in our school district and at each school site. And the goal is that at least 80% of our instruction, whether that be academic, social, emotional, or behavioral, and or mental health, 80% of our students are being able to meet that expectation or criteria. And then as you move up the triangle, you see the yellow, and I had not realized this was so animated, so this is fun. We start looking at our targeted group supports, which should be around 10 to 15% of our population. Those are those targeted interventions for either academic, social, emotional, behavioral, or mental health. And then at the very tippy top, really 3 to 5% of our student population should be receiving those very individualized, targeted interventions specific to them. And how we use that whole framework, and you can go ahead, just keep on clicking because it's just lots of animation here. We increase the intensity of the services. And so that is why we really want to make sure our tier 1 is solid at least 80%, so we can provide those adequate intensive services to those students who need those targeted interventions in that area. And it's that comprehensive system of academics and behavioral supports used through the problem-solving model. And I always like to think of this as a lava lamp. You kind of go up, and then hopefully you get what you need, and then you kind of go back down to that. And then to make it a little more real for you, this model actually came out of the public health system. Education does not get to own it, even though we are very prideful about our triangle. And we all experienced this in the pandemic, where we saw, that tier 3 hospitals very, very had many, many patients. And so they talked about things that needed to happen. And a universal practice we all engage in is washing our hands. And sometimes we get a little head cold and we need an over-counter medication, and that's our tier 2. And then sometimes we have to go to the doctor and get an individualized prescription, and that's our tier 3. So really, MTSS is real life, and we live it every day when we start to think about it. Okay. And then just to contextualize it back into the educational setting, these are just the different components, just to give you a little more concrete steps that we use. I try to model that we don't want to take the Oprah approach, where it's like, you get an intervention, and you get an intervention, and everybody gets an intervention, because we're all tier 2 in something. But we want to use data to drive what those decisions are going to be and those interventions are going to be. So that problem-solving model in the middle is the critical piece to moving up and down that framework. And then everything fits under the MTSS model. Whether we're talking academics, we've talked about restorative practices a little bit already, social emotional learning, attendance, academics, and more recently, our mental health supports through our Project Aware. So everything kind of funnels through that singular system with multiple supports.
Thank you. Next, we just wanted to review some things we already have and we are continuing within the Carson City School District. Over the last several years, we have a lot of really outstanding interventions in place at all our school sites. So this is just kind of a review of some of the things we have currently. All of our school sites have a site-based interventionist. This is coming out of the general fund, and this person, a position, is able to support with both academic, behavioral, and even mental health supports. They are there as a resource for the school staff, and they are as a coach for other staff members who need guidance, and they really can act in a capacity where they, as a support. All of our elementary schools have an instructional coach. This is through the title funding, and that person really is focused on those students who have gaps in their learning and are able to provide more specific interventions for surrounding instruction, specifically in math and reading. And those folks in our district, some are able to push in and work with the teacher of record. Sometimes they might do a little pull-out group where they take a small group in the hall and work on a specific skill or a gap in the student's learning. They even, the other day at a meeting, we heard a creative approach at one of the elementary sites. This instructional coach is meeting the students on the playground, and as they transition back, that kind of wasted time where they're in the hall and messing around, that person is using that time to just do flashcards really fast, and they've had great success with that because it's not then removing them from their classroom. It's just a little extra practice, and they've really made it kind of a game and fun. How many can you get before we get back to your classroom? So these folks are being really creative in the way we're providing some additional supports for those students who are not making adequate progress on their SBAC, their MAPS, and those type of testing. Also, all of our school sites have one or more school social workers. Our high school, Carson High School, has 3 social workers, and all of our other sites have a full-time school social worker who is available to all students within the school. And then those students who do move into Tier 2 and Tier 3, the social worker makes a plan with the family and the student to how they can better support them, if they need to check in with them regularly, but every student has full access to those resources, and that is a grant-funded position. All secondary sites have school counselors, and with the addition of social workers and counselors, they're able to have a variety of one that's able to really focus on credit, graduation, scheduling, and one that can really focus on that mental support. But we also have options for students and families. If you're not connecting with a certain individual at that school site, there's always another individual, an adult, who available to you if maybe that's a better fit for your family. All of our school sites across the district have access to our McKinney-Vento foster care liaison, and that's a grant-funded position. And we are, Hannah Etchinson is in that position. Any student can be referred to that program, and then she's the one who would make the final decision if they qualify. But then, of course, there's resources for that family and student that would come with that qualification. All of our school sites have access to mental health services through Project Aware, the project that Michelle Cleveland is running as the coordinator. That is a grant-funded position. And we currently are kind of leading the charge with Project Aware in our state. We have 4 community partners that we have created an MOU with that actually can come into the school sites and provide mental health services directly to the student at the school site for those families who are not able to get to an appointment or who don't want their child to miss the whole day of school for a quick maybe check-in appointment. So we do have 4 community partners coming into our school, and that's available to any student who reaches that Tier 2, Tier 3 level, which is really outstanding for our district. Also, all of our school sites have access to targeted professional learning opportunities with our UNR PBIS Technical Assistance Center. Right now, we have had a slow rollout. First, we had a few schools that were Tier 1 training, and then a few more schools came on as Tier 2 and Tier 3. And now this year, all of our school sites are part of the MTSS cohort training process through UNR. And that professional learning is facilitated both here in Carson, and sometimes we go down to Reno, and the MTSS teams have grown at each school site to include a lot of members. And there's certain members that are required, such as counselors, social workers, the principal or assistant principal of the school, a regular education teacher, a special education teacher. Those MTSS teams have really grown, so the professional learning surrounding that has increased across the district.
I'm wondering, before we move on from that slide, I noticed, and I'm sure we all did, that most of the staff or the programs are grant funded.
Yes.
Are they competitive grants, pass-through grants? And how long are the grants going to last that we have now? Because it looks like it'd be hard to continue without the grant funding.
Sure. Several of the grant funded positions are through ESSER funding, through the COVID relief funding, which is concluding at the end of the school year. The McKinney-Vento grant fund is a competitive application. That's a 3-year grant cycle. We were awarded that last year, so we have that for 2 more years. We've never not been awarded it, so I feel like it is one that will continue. We have a very strong program within the district. And in fact, Mr. Winward and Mr. Fueling, as we all know, we've been referring to the fiscal cliff when some of this ESSER money ends, and we have been very aware of that, of what positions need to move back into the general fund, what we need to do to make sure that these supports stay intact, because we have seen a positive impact for having these in our schools. So of course, nothing is guaranteed, but I don't see that these positions at this time, there is still a great need for these supports within our school, just to continue us moving forward with both academics, mental health, and our social emotional well-being. We just wanted to clarify the role of the interventionist and the instructional coach. We have a little quote there for you. Coaching has been found to directly or indirectly improve student achievement and social emotional outcomes, while all at the same time improving teacher instructional practices. And I think we know best practice, if the teacher feels they have the skills in the tools in their toolbox to deliver quality instruction and that tier 1 instruction without distractions, and we can support them where needed, we will get better outcomes from our students and from our staff. And it'll be a place they want to stay and work. So that's really the role of this MTSS and these coaches, is to support our staff when you have a student you don't know what else to do with, and you feel as a school you've tried everything. These are just additional resources for you that maybe have a different skill set to come in and offer that co-teaching or support, or maybe even sometimes a break where you step out for a minute and they can step in, and just to help you regroup. They can be used in a variety of ways. We have reading specialists who at the elementary level really are tier 1 school-wide coaching and consultation. As was discussed earlier in the meeting tonight, the press rollout, I think at Mark Twain, it was mentioned in the updates, these interventionists were able to do a quick snapshot of a student, a 1-minute quick screener of each child in the whole school. And it really showed if there was any deficiencies specifically related to phonemic awareness. And then the interventionist could say, okay, these 10 students really didn't learn blends. Maybe they missed that 1 year in school. Maybe they were sick, or they just never grasped it. And then they can take those children and really be strategic about how we deliver a lesson specific to that need. So those interventionists are crucial because they're able to have the time in their schedule to work with smaller groups of children. Tier 2, that then would go to the tier 2 when we are pulling out those smaller groups. At the secondary level, they're acting as a school-wide coach, consultation, helping with the proficiency scale rollout. Tier 2 wise, they also may have a specific intervention class for students who have been deficient over many years in their test results. They may have that class in place of, say, an elective, to really continue to work on building up those skills. They also may offer a before school class and after school, those credit recovery type opportunities. So we're providing more opportunities for students to access what they need academically. And this is these two roles are critical within the function of the MTSS framework. The interventionists really help with that data decision making. We can look at data and have more than just one test result from last spring. They can look at more frequent results and see the progress the student is making and continue to monitor that growth. So when they are making growth, we can move them back into tier 1. So some new site-based supports that we're really excited about with the addition of adding Stephanie to our district. As I said, all school sites will have access to our district-wide engagement and attendance specialist. This is a grant-funded position, and Megan Newman is in this role. And previously, we had a truancy officer. We renamed the position to really be a re-engagement specialist. We felt truancy officer was kind of scary to families and didn't seem very welcoming, that we're going to send the truancy officer to you. So this position really is to engage families so they are attending school regularly, and she's working with families that are struggling with getting their children to school for whatever reason it may be. Maybe it's an academic deficiency, maybe it's a case of bullying, maybe they need a connection at school, and she really is in the role to support those families and get them engaged in the school before they become chronically absent. So that is how we're addressing our absenteeism rate, and she is a resource for all students who will have access to that. All elementary sites this year were added 2 additional paraprofessionals, which will be used for support with interventions. So they are, again, an additional support for sites to really, when you need that small group, when the teacher needs someone to just work with this child individually, every school site was given 2 additional paraprofessionals that could work with K through 5 as in the paraprofessional role. All of our sites, staff, and community members now have access to web-based programming. These are 2 new programs that we have brought on as a district. The first one is Care Solace, and this is a really outstanding resource. A family can call in, or they can do it online, and it will connect them to services in our community. Now, they don't provide therapy, they don't provide the services, but they will pull up a list for the family and say, okay, these are the 20 providers in Northern Nevada that take your insurance. These 5 are taking new clients. These 2 have an appointment next week. Do you want us to schedule you an appointment? So it's really just removing that barrier for families. They have multiple different languages that they're able to operate in. And any school staff member can put in what they call a warm handoff. And if they have a concern with a student, they could fill out a report, just a little quick online, and then someone from Care Solace would call the family and say, hey, someone at the school site was concerned about your child's well-being. Would you like us to put you in contact with services? And the family, of course, can say yes, please, or no, we're not interested, or I would like to know more about this. So Care Solace, they say on average, saves a family about 60 phone calls. And that can be a very frustrating process when you're calling and you need support for your child and you're told, oh, we can't get you in until next January. And so this really can remove that and get our families service quicker. So that's been we do have a 2-year contract with Care Solace, and it's available to any staff, student, or family. So you might even have a child who's not school age or who just graduated, and you could use this service for them as well. And the second new service we have is Paper. This is a very popular service in many districts across Nevada. Washoe, Clark, many districts are using Paper. Paper is grant funded at this time. It is a 24-hour access online tutoring. So anyone can call if you're struggling with a math assignment at night and you don't know what to do and your family's frustrated because they can't help you. You can call in and there is live access to someone who can help you. And it's not just to provide you the answer. They can actually work through the problem with you. They can maybe do a little reteach to show you how to get to the solution. And there's many facets of Paper right now. We're using it kind of as like a tutoring for outside of school hours. But if we have success with that, there are some resources for teachers and schools that we may look into in the future. But at this time, all of our TOSAs through Ms. Macy's department have been trained on Paper. And as they go out and meet with sites and PLCs and staff, They are just providing this as a resource. Like, hey, if you give a really difficult assignment and kids are struggling and no one's turning it in, this is another avenue for families to have that access at home. Also, something new that we're very proud of is access to our district intervention assistance team, which is called our DIET process. And this is a resource that Stephanie's going to go into great detail about, where school sites can put in a referral if they really get to that point where they feel we don't know what else to do and we need supports at our site for this particular situation. And there's a process now to get those supports to the site and to the families.
So the District Intervention Assistance Team is a multidisciplinary team of across different avenues in our district. So we make sure we have representatives from counseling to mental health, to administrators, to district leadership, to social workers, to MTSS and special education representatives, all on the team that are ready and willing to respond to schools and what their needs are. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but really looking at the whole child, whole system approach, and looking that most times when it's a behavioral or social, emotional, or mental health concern, there's most likely an academic concern as well. And what's unique to Carson is we include our academic team of curriculum instruction. Cheryl Macy sits on our team, which many other districts do not include that. So we have a gift here in Carson that we intentionally put that piece in play, because it's hard to argue, is it an academic problem or a behavioral problem that we need to address? Most times it's both. And then we look through those different pieces and we start assigning different responses that we're going to provide to the school. So on our next slide, there are 4 areas that schools can refer for. If it's a behavioral concern where they just need that technical support, I've done everything I know how to do. I feel like I'm throwing Jell-O at the wall and hoping it sticks. Can someone please come out and help and support? And whether that is a student just receiving general education supports, special education supports, or just a 504, they are all welcome to apply for those. We also look at the attendance, so kind of that ESARB, SARB approach that team can wrap around as well. And then mental health referrals. So looking at Care Solace or through Project Aware, we can bring students or families that need supports and work through those mental health pieces. And Michelle Cleveland can help us get access to those quickly and swiftly. And if we need to have a behavior hearing, we can go through those pieces as well. Tasha does oversee those pieces and guides the team through those, but then you again have that multidisciplinary team there to support the student, because there's often lots of layers to each of those situations. And we are not opposed to also having academic, like we've done everything we can, or we've already had a school submit for some transportation support as well. So those are just the 4 general, but open to really anything the schools need. It is a team that meets bi-weekly, so every other Friday morning, we meet to either staff cases or just talk about some systematic approaches that we need to tighten up or things we are hearing of concern. It is truly a problem-solving team. It is not a got you team. It's not a why haven't you done this team. It's okay, so you've done all these things. What can we do as next steps? How can we best help you as the school and help the student and the families? We try to respond to those sites within 48 hours, school business hours, for that consult. So they may submit the form and then someone from the team will follow up with kind of next steps, what maybe get to bring prepared to the meeting so we can make it efficient and productive as possible. And then through that model, through the MTSS coaching lens, we can work on what's called the Prevent, Teach, Reinforce, which is a team-modeled approach to a functional behavioral assessment and behavior intervention plans that we can put into place to best support the schools and the student. We may provide some technical assistance around the managing acting out cycle of defiance and looking at those 7 phases and how are we going to respond when a student is engaging in those 7 phases, or consulting with the multidisciplinary team to build that site's capacity. So when they see that kind of incident or similar incident again, they feel they have more tools in the toolbox to efficiently respond before it becomes to the point where they're wanting to throw Jell-O to the wall and hope something sticks.
So before we get to this slide, first of all, we might have let the cat out of the bag because I don't know if they've officially announced this yet. So sorry if we did that. But Carson City School District over the last at least 2 years has made great strides in implementing this program, rolling it out. And today in a meeting when we were giving kind of shout outs and accolades, several people at our cabinet meeting, and myself included, the conversation seems to have changed across our district to a more preventative model where we really are looking at what else can we do, and how can we intervene earlier before this gets so out of control we don't know what to do. And we've seen that with our teachers, our students, our administrators, and at the district level of how we can intervene soon, and we can fix and close those gaps with support to make sure that student is college and career ready and able to graduate and have a successful life. As along that thread, as I said, we are all now part of the cohort 1, 2, or 3 process. And Fritch Elementary School is going to be recognized, we hear, for winning a platinum award for their efforts in positive behavior supports and the system they have established at Fritch Elementary School with their Bark Bucks and their student matrix. And students really know what is expected in each area, from getting off the bus to lining up in the cafeteria, and how, if you demonstrate those appropriate behaviors, how the school recognizes you for that behavior consistently. And the whole staff is really on board with that process. They are seeing great reduction in behavior. They're seeing students, their attendance is improving. Students want to be there in that climate and culture. They are seeing an increase due to really having a highly functional MTSS system. And so it looks like they will be potentially selected for a platinum award, which recognizes these specific areas. The expectations are going along with specific lessons. So not just saying, hey, be quiet in the hall. It's really teaching, that reteaching, that reminding, and then that reinforcement. The acknowledgement system, how are our teachers going to recognize when a student is doing the appropriate thing? They have a really strong system for that. A discipline flow chart, what are the steps? Do you just need a few minutes to calm down? Do we need to have a conversation with a teacher you have a connection with? What is the next step? They're also looking at data frequently through their MTSS team. They have the Big 5 data report where they see students who are maybe demonstrating those minor behaviors, those small little things that of course can lead to bigger things if ignored. They're looking at data and then they're making a plan to address those before they become to the next level. Their tiered fidelity inventory was at 70% or higher. They have a data narrative to know, what do we do? How do you get into tier 2? How do you get back to tier 1? How do you get to tier 3? To tier 3. So they're very clear on the rules of what is what. And then they also had a letter of recommendation from the Carson City School District. And there is going to be an award, if they're chosen, which they may be, there is going to be an award ceremony we would like to invite you to on February 13th during the national conference. And they should be recognized at that time. So more details to follow on that.
I'm wondering, who gives out that award?
The Nevada Association for Positive Behavior Supports gives out that award in their selection committee for anyone who submits.
Thank you.
So in conclusion, Carson City School District, as I mentioned, has just made great strides in responding to students and site level needs. All 10 of our sites are now a part of the MTSS journey with the goal to inspire and empower innovators, leaders, and thinkers as aligned with our district's strategic plan. When we effectively implement the MTSS framework as a strong, comprehensive system of climate and culture of learning, it will ultimately impact student success. And that is the goal of our team. And we just wanted to give you an update of all the positive things going on within our district.
Thank you for that update. Do we have any questions from board members or compliments? Go ahead, Trustee Casiopo.
Both. You know, it's a lot of work. I mean, learning about MTSS, oh boy, there's a lot going on. It's, you know, it's a bit to digest. And I think it can be real effective, and I think we're doing a good job, and there's always more to learn. We were at the NASB conference a few weekends ago for a short course, if you will. And one of the school districts that was presenting their MTSS program was talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, they were at a solid level 2, getting into level 3, and they said it's taken them about 9 years. That's and so I'm wondering where, I mean, I'm sure every school's a little different. Where are we at, and what's our growth plan, if that's the
Sure.
right term?
Yes, I agree. It is kind of a slow process because it does take time to build those systems, to make sure you have the staff buy-in. And it's not a program where we're just handing out rewards. And sometimes there's a misunderstanding that MTSS or PBIS is rewarding bad behavior or rewarding kids all the time. And that's really not the foundation of it. Is building in those supports and intervention at an early stage. So we have had all of our schools. There's 3 schools we add. This is their first year as part of the process. Pioneer, Empire, and Seeliger are just entering the process, even though they already have some things in place at their school sites. And they have some great things at their school sites. So those will just be tweaked and continue to grow. But for example, Carson High has been a part of the process and really should be tier 3 on the books. And at our first training, they have a new leader, and he said, I want to slow this down and go back a little bit. I'm new to the community, I'm new to the school, I'm new to this staff. I know on paper we're tier 3, but I don't think we are. I think we need to take a step back and do the training another year and let it grow. So I do think it's a long process. And even though we're in officially the 3rd year of implementation, there are still a lot of learning and a lot of growing. Some schools are moving along a little faster than others. Honestly, our elementary schools, it is a little easier to do this at the elementary level than the secondary level. So it just size-wise and the age and development of the children. So it's still a process, and we will have many, many years of MTSS. It's not a phase. It's not going away. And actually, when I moved offices, I found some of my tier training books, and actually Ms. Keating was in the training with me, and it was from 2009. And when I first came to Carson, someone said, oh, we did this. We're not going to do this anymore. That's a phase. It's new. And I said, this isn't new. This is a program. It's not something we bought or a program that's going to go away. This is a system of supports for our whole district to support all students. So it's really not, a trend. It's going to continue to grow.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Right.
And I like the approach of, hey, let's slow down and make sure we're understanding this at all the levels, because you want to get it right and you want to tweak it along the way to make it fit. I'm sure every year is a little different kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I appreciate the hard work that goes into it. So thanks to you and everybody involved in it.
Yeah, on a different matter, you mentioned paper. I'm wondering, do we have any data to indicate how many students are taking advantage of it?
We do not yet, because we just are rolling it out recently, and we were waiting for the Infinite Campus sync, and Brian Waltz was outstanding in sharing that data with the company. So we don't have live data yet for you, but we will definitely come back with a report for student usage. Right now, we need to get it out there as a resource for families so they know it's available to them. Care Solace, on the other hand, though, we do have, they send me a monthly report, and we already have schools that have put students in, and I think the most recent report, we had 60 families who had been, had at least called, or someone had referred them and they had connected them to supports. So even though it is still new, our social workers have been trained, our counselors have been trained, and it is a service that is being utilized.
Well, I hope that the information does get out on paper, because I went to school a long, long time ago, but it would have been nice to have a support system like that, where if you're in the middle of the night, you can't figure out a problem, you can contact somebody. Is it answered by a live person, hopefully?
Yes, it is college and master's degree students mainly is what they said is generally the live person. There's a blend too. There is some artificial intelligence for some parts of the resource, but you can kind of choose. There's also little lessons, there's games built in there. So if you just need more practice and you get really into a topic, it will kind of feed you some more practice or support if it's a concept you're struggling with, but there also is the live tutoring.
Thank you.
And they've also incorporated in a component for career and college readiness.
Yes, they have.
With modules and interactive components, so it's pretty expansive.
And on paper and the Care Solace is, how are we making our parents aware of these resources? Because kids usually don't need help with math homework at a convenient time, right? They usually don't understand it and you're pulling out your hair. So how are we getting that information out to our families?
Yes. So Care Solace has been coming through the social workers, and paper, we were kind of waiting on the Infinite Campus rollout, and then we're going to have Dan Davis put out some community-wide narrative around these new resources for families and just continue to have that. It's posted in the school sites. There's some flyers on the front desk, but we are aware that we need to really get the word out that these are new and they're resources for families. And that's our next steps as soon as we're ready to roll, which...
Do we have any other questions? Thank you very much for your presentation and the good work that you are doing.
Thank you.
We'll move on to agenda item 12, which is presentation and possible action to adopt the CCSD Restorative Discipline Plan for the 2023 to 2024 school year as required by NRS 392.4644 for possible action. Tasha Fuson.
I'm going to give everybody a second to shift. There you go. All right, thank you, President Crossman. Tasha Fuson for the record. We are required by state law to write a district-wide restorative discipline plan. And it has to go in front of you each year. Some of you have been on the board for a while, so you know you've heard this presentation, but the document you're looking at, I'm sure, looks a little different to you because as part of the process, what we are required to do is get input from teachers, parents, and other stakeholders within the district. So within our process for doing so is to take last year's plan. I send it out to principals, vice principals, ask them to convene their teams at their school sites. Their teams consist of a student if it's secondary, parents for all grade levels or all 3 levels, elementary, middle, and high school, teachers and support staff members and administrator. Then they get together, they take a look at their site-based data for discipline. How many students have they suspended? How many students have they expelled? In the case of elementary schools, because they were not permitted to suspend or expel students, they looked more deeply at, well, how many students were put in an alternative learning environment. They look at it by subpopulation to make sure that there's no discrepancies between, are we overly suspending or in-school suspending boys, which that's interesting. I point that out because actually in a couple of situations from our elementary schools, they went, oh gosh, did you know that our boys, were about 70%, 75% of the students that were put into an alternative educational learning environment. So in-school suspension, which usually means at a desk outside of the vice principal's office, right, in elementary. But looking at that data, it's really eye-opening to be able to say what are our trends. So, and then looking at our district's plan to provide us feedback to say, here's what we would like to see changed. So in essence, our plan that I have submitted to the state over the years has consisted of a basic narrative and then 5 appendices. So one of the appendix was our matrix, which is in part of this plan that you're looking at, starting at page 6 on down. That was its own appendix. I had put our regulation 525 that has all the directions for how we're supposed to go about doing business that we just presented on. That was one of the appendices. We had the cyberbullying flow map of how you address or how you investigate bullying and cyberbullying. That was one of them. Restorative plan and how you write, that was one of them. So the feedback from our school sites was, this is great, Tasha, but it's 75 pages long. Could you condense it to make it a little bit more accessible for our stakeholders to utilize? And can you actually make it more representative of the restorative practices that we're being trained on and asked to implement in our school sites. So that is what we did, is we took quite a bit of fluff, if you will, out of here and tried to streamline it. There's other pieces that are required by state law that we have to include, and those were in your executive summary in your packets. But by state law, we are required to have information on, let me find where I am here. Okay, so to provide for the temporary removal of a pupil from classroom or other premises of public school in accordance with state law, to provide for the placement of a pupil in a different school in the school district in accordance with state law, to include names of any members on a committee for the temporary alternative placement of pupils, et cetera. So those pieces in your executive summary dictate what minimally we have to have included, and that we have to address, as well as what we think is important for our stakeholders. So this plan, once approved by the board, is submitted to Department of Education, and then it is also posted on our school district website, as well as all of our individual school websites. That's an important piece because it's really a resource material or tool that we want our families to be able to access, to know what to expect if their students are exhibiting discipline or experiencing discipline in school, right? So the way it basically reads is, in that first page is just that we believe in safe and connected schools, and that basically a list of student rights. Then we talk on page 2 about the multi-tiered systems of support that we're doing. You just heard a long presentation on that. So that in page 2 and 3 was in response to our that was primarily teacher feedback to say, hey, can you give us a little bit more information on that so that we can help communicate with families. Then that continues on page 4 and page 5 of what those practices look like at the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 intervention. There's also at the bottom of page 5, for instance, some guiding questions on what a restorative chat would look like. And then on page 6 is really where the nuts and bolts come in. This is our restorative discipline matrix. So for our practitioners and or for our families, if your child, for instance, has an issue with bullying, you can look up on page 7 under bullying. On the left-hand side of this table, it tells you all of the board policies and regulations that deal with that in case you want to look at that, but also gives you the state definition of bullying. And then as you're reading across those lists, it tells you an X is a required action of the school, an O is a additional one that the school can consider. It doesn't mean if there's nothing marked there that you wouldn't, you couldn't do those things that aren't marked. It just wouldn't be typical. So the reason why on page 6, for instance, if you look at, it's the key, because of course, trying to not spell out every one of these for space, we had to use shortened abbreviations for those things. And again, here you can see it says required actions is what the X is, the O is additional actions, and then depending on severity and or frequency. So for instance, if a student gets in trouble for, let me see, what might be a good one to look at. Well, let's take a look at page 11. So if you look at intimidation, which is the third one down on page 11, and you look at the first X, it says parental notification. So if a student is intimidating another student, we're definitely going to call a parent. That's a requirement. The ASC is the Administrator Student Conference. So our administrator is going to talk to that student. We're going to find out what's going on. An option is maybe to have a counselor work with that student. That's not required, but it's an option in case that's appropriate. The next X is for in-school procedures. That means depending on schools' individual behavioral matrix about what they've agreed upon of how they're going to handle those things, you might see some site-specific things. But you'll notice that there's no X's or O's in those next couple ones. So the RPC would be a required parent conference. So what is the difference between parent notification and a required parent conference? Parent notification can look something like, I call your mom, but your mom doesn't answer, so I leave your mom a message and then I send an email. It's not a two-way communication, but I've notified your parent. A required parent conference means this is important enough that you're going to come in and we're going to have a sit-down face-to-face conversation. That's kind of the difference. So in this case, RPC is not marked. But if this was a very severe form of intimidation, actually underneath that, it talks about the fact that that probably becomes a bullying issue. But you do have to take into consideration what what actually is occurring. So it doesn't mean just because nothing's marked there that you can't go there depending on severity. So suspension is the next one. The one after that is basically law enforcement being involved. DH is the discipline hearing, EXP is expulsion, and then RPA is restorative practices. So again, it's read to, if you're a family and your child experiences this, and next is that should for sure be happening. So for a site administrator, if I want to know how to handle something, I'm looking and I'm going, oh, I definitely need to talk to the parents. I definitely need to have an administrator involved in this. I definitely need to do X, Y, Z. The other things are optional. Again, the O's are really suggestions, but not requirements. And then if it's open, it's okay. You know, if depending on the severity, you might want to add that in. So that is how that matrix is read across the way. And then if you turn to page 20, this is where we address like the plan for a temporary removal of a pupil from the classroom in accordance with state law. I'm not going to read that to you, but there is a provision in state law that says if a teacher, right, wants to have a child removed from their classroom because they feel that child's behavior is infringing on their ability to teach in the classroom, they do have the right to say to, of course, their administrator, I want this child removed from my classroom. When that occurs, the administrator of the school site has to call the parents, schedule a meeting. The teacher, parent, and administrator meet to say, okay, this teacher is requesting your child's removal from the classroom because of the behavior. The teacher has to explain to the family what the issue is or what the concern is. Hopefully we come up with a plan, right, a restorative plan to address that behavior. Then the administrator at that point in time has the decision-making authority to say, no, I'm going to put this child back in your classroom with this plan, or maybe I'll do classroom change. But if the teacher disagrees then, so say for instance, I say, no, this child's coming back to your classroom, teacher, and the teacher disagrees, they have a right to then say, no, I want to go to this committee. And if they go to the committee, then that is what you see the names, because we are actually required to post the names of the educators at each one of our school sites that is going to serve on that committee. And then it goes through the process of what that looks like, because then you have another meeting, and the teacher then explains what to that committee, the request or the reason for their desire to have that student removed for a longer term from their classroom. That committee makes the recommendation, and then the administrator takes it from there and implements that plan. So that is in there. That's been in state law for quite some time, and the state requires us to put that as part of our plan. Any questions on that? Because I know just some looks, so, okay.
So if you have to list the teachers in the name, you know, the specific names, do you have to bring this back then every year if those names change?
Yes. Every year we update it, and they also have to be nominated or selected by their peers. It says selected by their peers. What that normally looks at most sites is, hey, staff, these teachers have volunteered to be on this committee. If you're interested in serving on this committee too, let us know. So there's notification to school staffs about who's going to represent you. It is very rare that this committee is ever called to meet. This is my 5th year in this position. Thus far, we've not had any reports. Schools are required to report to me, and I'm required to report to the state if this were to occur. And again, through the 4 years I've been in this seat, I've not had one report yet. But it's been in state law for quite some time. And that's because in most cases, our administrators try to work with our teachers to problem solve that. I'm not going to say class changes haven't been made. They have, but they haven't necessarily had to go to this committee. Remember, this committee is if the principal meets with the family and the teacher makes a recommendation or a decision and the teacher disagrees with that and wants to go and say, no, I don't want this child in my classroom, then it goes to the committee. So luckily, we're usually able to problem solve things before it gets to that point.
I have a question. I just noticed, how come Ms. Crookshanks and Mr. Conley aren't on there? They're the only two principals that aren't sitting on those? Is there a reason for that, or?
No, that's just you're required to have an administrator, so it can be the principal or it can be the vice principal. It just depends on the school site and how they've divvied up their duties.
Okay. And then the functional behavior assessment on 21, who sits on that? Is that, so I see it says like district resources, law enforcement. Is that like an SRO? Is that like district employees, reputable counseling services? How do we
So
determine
there's two different ways an FBA can be done. So schools have the ability to do a short form functional behavioral assessment as they're developing a restorative plan of action for a student. That is basically just a set of questions that walks that site-based team. The site-based team is going to be depending on the student, right? So if the student is a student who receives special education services at the school site, you're probably going to have the special ed teacher who provides those services, the general education teacher, your school social worker, or the school administrator. If you're at a secondary, you're going to bring in a counselor. If the student has medical needs, you're going to bring in the nurse. If the student has, speech and language services, you might bring in that person. So depending on the student and what professionals within the school environment work with that student, that committee is going to get together, and then they're going to work with the family to try to get to the basis of why, if I'm going to use myself, if I'm a student, why is Tasha misbehaving? And the student is actually part of that process too. So it looks like, okay, so what is the behavior? When is the behavior occurring? Is there anything that is triggering that behavior? So do we know that every day at lunch, Tasha goes out to lunch, and when she comes in, she's upset, she's not consolable, she's, acting out in class. So a short form functional behavioral assessment will walk you through this so that you can then come up with some ideas. In that case, you might say, well, geez, Tasha, what's going on in the playground? Why are you coming back from lunch upset every day? Maybe she's being bullied out on the playground and we didn't know that. So that short form helps us get to the basis of that and then come up with a plan to address whatever that behavior is. Now, a functional behavioral assessment, if it becomes much more in-depth than working with a general ed student in an MTSS type structure. And so we have to do FBAs, for instance, for a student on an IEP who ends up being suspended more than 10 days. You do a manifestation determination of functional behavioral assessment to see why they're, whether or not the behavior that they're exhibiting is related to their disability before you can take disciplinary action. So it depends on how it's being utilized, but that was just a description of what that means. Sometimes you would involve your SROs if that's if that individual student has a relationship with that person and that person's been involved in that, whatever plan's going on with that student. Sometimes we involve district folks. So it's used in different ways, but typically used to get to whether it's the short form, which is just a screener, or the longer form, which is much more in-depth and much more complex, to really try to figure out what students' triggers are so that we can be more specific in how we intervene, right? So there's two different: short form, which can be done by any group. The long form is usually has to be done by a specialist, a behavioral specialist, school psychologist who has expertise in that area. Okay, so then on page 23, we talk about the plan for placement of a pupil in a different school within the district. Basically, state law says if you're going to take a student out of school A and put them in school B, the schools have to meet, and there has to be a service that school B can offer that school A cannot. You can't just go, I'm going to pluck a student from Eagle Valley and put them at Carson Middle because they're misbehaving here. I'm going to plop them there. You can't do that, right? You literally have to say, okay. In some cases, for instance, in our district, we have removed students maybe from Carson High School and placed them in Pioneer. And we've said, well, this student is struggling to be successful in a school of 2,400 students, but in a school with 220 kids in person, in that smaller environment with more support from adult supports, that would be a justifiable rationale to move a student from here to here. But you just can't pluck them and put them other places without actually saying, we are making this change and shifting the student from school to school, and here's the services that they're going to get in the new environment. So that's what that talks about. Any questions on that one? All right, then that last part is truancy. So, and I appreciate Member Clapham came to talk to me today about processes in our community. For instance, for truancy, most of you are familiar with our student attendance review board. You also heard from Stephanie and Christy how we are meshing some of that with our MTSS and our district intervention assistance team. We have not been super successful with our SARB outcomes in the last few years, actually changing behavior of students. So really trying to figure out if our goal now in addressing attendance is really trying to figure out if we can figure out the basis for students missing. So again, Stephanie and Christy addressed that. So if I'm not attending school, why? Am I staying home and watching a younger sibling when they're sick and that has a tendency to keep me out of school? Is my guardian leaving before I go to school and I oversleep and don't get up and I don't get to school? Why am I not wanting to come to school? Am I not academically successful? Therefore, I want to avoid it. So just trying to get to the core reason for that truancy and then being able to provide that wraparound services and support. So is this student experiencing an uncomfortable environment and they avoid it? So what can we do? What supports do we need? Does the student need counseling? Does the student just need to have a check-in adult peer or not an adult peer, but an adult role model that they can connect with at the school site? So we can say, okay, come to school every day and you're gonna meet with, Mrs. Fuson because she's a trusted adult in the school campus, and then just having that relationship's gonna help get you there. So we are trying to do it in a much more proactive way to see if we can have a better result than what we've had in the past several years with our current student attendance review board process, which just, again, hasn't resulted in changed behaviors. So we'll try to be more preventative than reactive. So that is our plan. Again, I am required to ask for your approval and adoption. If you have other questions for me.
I do have a question. NRS 392.149 on habitual truancy allows for the student to be issued a citation into juvenile court. Have we ever done that, or is that being considered at all?
So I'm trying to figure out how to say this in a very politically correct manner that's not going to get me in trouble with any of our community partners. So we, as a school entity, are not the issuer of those.
I know, I realize that it has to be law enforcement.
So,
we have SROs.
And it's
available.
typically done, had been done through the attendance review board process. I know, Lupe, you served on some of those. So we're kind of at the mercy of some of our community partners to bring those things to fruition. So we have not, that's where we're not seeing that that when students are brought to that student attendance review board, that the act of showing up there or the interventions that are laid out by that board, whether it be a citation, whether it be a fee or fine to the family, whether it be revocation of the driver's license, we're not seeing that done very often. I think the feeling of our community is that we need to get stronger about our intervention and support services within the school system before any action is willing to be taken by our community partners. So we're taking a step back and we're saying, let's look at our internal processes. Let's do everything we can do to get to the reason for that truancy and why these students are not engaging, why they're not attending. Let's make sure that we do everything we can within our ability to do so to proactively try to address that truancy. And then we'll go back to our community partners and say, okay, here's everything that we've done. Every communication that we've made, every call to DCFS or any outside agency, any offering of clinical supports and intervention and counseling, all of these things, and it's not working. So can we now get some kind of support from the,
Gotcha.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, gotcha.
Our community partners. Can we get some support from our community partners?
Yeah, I
Because we are
understand.
not, sometimes people don't realize we're not able to find, we don't find families. We don't have the ability to find families. So that's not done through us.
No, I
Um,
clearly understand that, having a background in law enforcement, who
Yeah.
can issue citations or not. And if I could, I have just one more. On the last page,
Oh.
page 26,
Yes, my apologies. I didn't.
it talks about the fourth truancy.
Mhm.
And if you're over 16, you have a driver's license, it looks like the consequence could be the revocation, suspension of your license. But what if a child is under the age of 15 or 16 and doesn't have a driver's license? What consequences could they be facing? Because
Well,
it's not really clear in here.
technically, legally, we can deny access to getting their permit and or driver's. Well, when I say we, that committee, our students are required to get a signature, allegedly, from a school official.
In order to get their permit, you have to send in a form from the school that they are in a regular attendance.
But we are never asked to submit to the Department of Motor Vehicles any list of approved signatories, nor are we asked to ever like attach business cards or, right? So we're not seeing that to be an effective law. It might be there in law, but if there's no enforcement of that to make sure that whatever signature's on there is actually a signature of a person who has the authority to sign that. And then the other issue that we've had when I was the principal of Carson High School is even when we did rescind the driver's license, we had most of our students would still drive. So what the challenge becomes is engaging the families, right? Because if we can't engage our families to help us enforce those expectations, then it's not effective, right? If I have access to a vehicle, I have no problem driving it. I have my car keys, and no one seems to care that I'm driving other than the school or the student, SRO, then it's hard to enforce. Those are just challenges that we've seen. And I think, unfortunately, what it seems like from the school perspective, district perspective, is that there's other priorities out there for our community partners. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of enforcement for schools when it comes to truancy. But again, we're taking a much more proactive approach. Our goal this year through our attendance review portion of our district intervention assistance team is to try to get to the core of the problem. I was explaining to Trustee Clapham, this is the way I look at it. We are going to layer so many supports onto our families that they just have no option but to positively engage with us, either to help address the issue or to get us off their back. So either way, we are just going to provide extensive support and really hope that that's the way that it's going to make a change. We're going to give that a try. We're going to give it a try. There you go.
Do we have any other questions? I have a question, and maybe it's because it's not required in this plan, but I've been hearing about behavioral issues on buses and transportation, and I don't see anything in here that provides the course of action to be taken. And it's probably not required by that, but I'm just wondering, do we address that other places if it's not required here? How do we do that?
So that is an excellent question, President Crossman, because I noticed that myself only because it came to my table about how transportation was addressing misbehavior on buses with their pink slips or white slips. They actually call them white slips. So we will be including that, I'm sure, for next year's iteration. I am working with transportation right now to look at their own processes. Dr. Medina has worked with transportation department to add a portion for them in our minor behavior tab so they can start tracking their pink slips. So they do have a posted system that every student who's riding on the bus gets that says this is the process. The first time it's a notice, the second time we're meeting with your parents and we're gonna take you off the bus for 5 days. And then the third notice, they get like don't quote me on this, but I think it's a month-long suspension from the bus, and then beyond that, it's like removal from the bus altogether. So we're going to have to revisit those and bring them into this plan, but currently they have not been, but that discussion is happening, and we are now going to be able to, by adding them to our minor tab, start tracking what that looks like for transportation, how many students are actually getting, white slips, and how many students that's actually impacting. Right now, what happens is when we have severe issues on the bus, then they do involve school administrators. So, for instance, if there's gross damage, for instance, we had, unfortunately, a student who ripped up one of our seats last year, did severe damage. So at that point in time, transportation doesn't handle it. That goes to site administration, and then it's addressed. But, and then that would be addressed as vandalism, not necessarily bus vandalism. It's vandalism. So, but we're adding things in so we can actually look at that data to see where is it happening, and then how are we addressing it. So I think you will see that addressed more clearly and defined.
Wouldn't it be covered in policy 525 and regulation 525? Because there is a statement in there, traveling to and from school. So I would gather that mean on the school bus.
So again, so it is, and that's, so normally what we see transportation handle without school administration is student got out of their seat while we were driving or switch seats. Like that's a big no-no. It's a safety issue on a bus. But a bus driver might handle that by just giving the student a little white slip and saying, here's your notification. They call parents and they say, your child got up and walked from one seat to another while I was driving, which is unsafe and not acceptable on the bus. They won't necessarily include the school administration for that. When you start getting it, if there's a fight on the bus, school administration's involved, and it would be addressed with as just fighting. If there's bullying that occurs on the bus, it goes to site administration and they handle that. So what transportation handles just by itself is, and we do have a policy on transportation, but it's those you're not paying attention to the directions of the driver, and now I have to address that versus it's something else that falls underneath one of those other categories. But we are gonna, like I said, within our minor tab in the district, we are designating and we're just putting the transportation in there so we can actually look at that from a data perspective to see, are we having a lot of fights happening on buses that we just haven't realized because we haven't pulled it by location, that kind of thing. So we'll have more data on that, so it will drive more so and show up again more clearly in the plan.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. If there are no further questions, this is an action item.
I'll go ahead and make a motion.
Go ahead.
I move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees adopt the CCSD Restorative Discipline Plan for the 2023-2024 school year as submitted in accordance with NRS 392.4644.
Motion by trustee Varner and a second by trustee Cassiopo. Do we have any further public or further board comments or questions? Seeing none, do we have any public comment? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you all.
Thank you. We will move on to agenda item 13, which is discussion and possible action to approve suggested revisions to the district strategic plan Empower Carson City 2027. Andrew Fueling. It's 9:15.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, President Crossman and trustees. This evening, bringing back to you something that has been in the works for some time. As you may remember, back in November, no, actually I guess it was around November, the board approved the new strategic plan, a revised strategic plan for the district. But in that process, then the board clearly wanted to have some metrics some way to measure some of this over time so that there's some accountability to the community that we are trying to meet some of these goals and some of our objectives along the way. And so in the November of 22 meeting, we were looking at ideas for some of the metrics. Some of these were then presented to you as well. And ultimately, in the process of going through that and then bringing them back to another community PLC meeting, I think it was realized that there likely were still some needed revisions, and more specifically to goals 3 and 4, as well as a great narrowing of the number of potential metrics, because there were quite a few at first. So what you have this evening are some of the final revisions that our groups made during the May 2023 Community PLC. There's, again, just really slight revisions on that first page that has the mission, vision, values. Goal 1 does not have any. Goal 2 does not have any. Goal 3 and 4 were the more substantial ones. Goal 3, if I specifically remember, a lot of that had to do with trying to align that ultimately more with what the state's plan for parent engagement is, and some of the language and some of the expectations, and then but in line with what we were trying to do with it in the first place. So that's why you see goal 3 being completely struck out, and I just added in the new version. Goal 4, I'm sorry, I actually left that right kind of clearing column, tracking column on there, but really the same thing. And this one is really condensing and trying to clean up some of the language within that. Goal 5 remains unchanged. The last 5 pages then, because there are 5 goals. This may look familiar. It's been a little while since you've seen this, but the committee back in May then looking at what some of these revisions are existing and potentially revised goals, objectives, and strategies. Discussed some of these what are termed success standards, and basically if you think of them as a metric, and discussed some of them. Some of them have been, after going through some of the feedback from that May meeting, some of them have been revised slightly, some a little bit more. I think some of the percentages initially, two of the issues that came up is some of the percentages maybe were, because we don't have some information on these things, that they were a little high potentially. And then some that we have been able to gather some of the information, just kind of realigning those to make sense in terms of where we are and hopefully where we would want to be. So hopefully, and again, this metric piece has been talked about for really a number of years at this point. So I'm hoping that at this point, this is something that, you know, there has been several chances for feedback, you know, within this group, and hopefully the board feels like, I guess my goal ultimately is that this is a place to start, and it may not be perfect, and nothing ever is going to be perfect, but at least it's a place to start, that we can start getting our procedures in place, systems in place where we can start gathering some of these things. And then as I come to begin regularly reporting back to you on progress towards meeting the strategic plan, I have these data points for us to look at, whether good or bad, but it'll allow the conversation ultimately too, if it is what we have chosen here ultimately reflective of what we think it is. And so I think that that's a part of this too, is it's a little bit of a learning process for us. So, yeah.
I don't know. And one of the one of the things I worry about is the same things our teachers complain about the data they have to collect, which just makes the work harder. And I don't want to be doing that in this process either. So it's sometimes that data is, yes, we're doing it, or no, we're not. And so, you know what I mean, to keep circling over how do we have enough data that we have, like Molly and I were just looking at one about the volunteers. Yes, we're getting volunteers or we're not. Like, does it matter if it's 8% or 9%? Like, yes, we're attracting parent volunteers so I guess for me, part of it is we could collect data without getting into the weeds and making tons of work for you guys. And it's like sometimes it's a yes or a no. We're doing it or we're not doing it.
So, Trustee Walker, I appreciate you so much because I think you're really thoughtful about topics like this, especially so what I think is important potentially with questions like that is, although maybe this isn't a perfect way and it might be a little bit of a cumbersome way to generate data. I don't know how else to say that, but I think it will force conversations amongst this board that will really help me in my hopeful advocacy to reduce some of the nonsense that our staff does have to go through with for accountability purposes. And so, you know, if we're going through all this and going through these exercises and we're getting feedback and recognizing really publicly what works, what doesn't work, I think it helps with those conversations then at the state level with what these expectations are that are put upon our staff, administrators, teachers specifically. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but I appreciate the thought, but I think it'll make for some good conversations.
I guess my point is, it's not don't collect data. My point is the work is more important than the clerical work of tabulating how much of what we're doing. It's more important that we're engaging with the community and really making progress on these pillars that the community has said is important. And so I would hate to see that we're kind of circling the drain because we're trying to get enough data when we could be engaging with the community.
What I would offer is that, and if the board is comfortable with it, as we go through, there are some of these are not difficult to gather. I mean, they're really just, they're data points we can get easily. If there are some that, for whatever reason, become troublesome or complicated, that I don't know that to call this a living document is exactly right, but just for the ability to come back and say, look, this maybe some of these data points are really difficult to collect and really get the information we want or the information we think we should be getting out of it, and just that there's consideration in the future to potentially modify them or adjust. I mean, I think if the board is okay with that, I'm very comfortable with this.
Yeah, I would agree with that concept. I think if something's really hard to do and there's an easy way to do it and we can change it, I'm all in favor of that. But like you said, some of it's pretty easy, like volunteers, you have to do background checks on them. And so I'm sure that's just a matter of putting something in the computer and pulling that stat out.
Yeah, and I sympathize with that. I think, I think some level of data collection is important. I think we have to meet some metrics. I don't think every piece of data is important and needs to be cumbersome to the staff. And I certainly don't want to create a situation where folks that feel like they've got too much on their plate already now have more. But I think when you're talking about curriculum that matters and things like that, I think there's certain data that we're already collecting. It's just a matter of saying, this is what we're trying to achieve. So I don't know that it's collecting more data. It's just, we're trying to get from here to here, whether it's growth, whether it's some other metric, something like that. I do wonder on goal 2, and I'm not looking for a change here, but it sounds kind of lofty to me. Success standards, the second box down. CCSD will increase the percentage of proficient students in ELA and math by 10% each year for all 3 levels. Is that sounds like that's pretty lofty. I want to see improvement, certainly. I was one of the ones who brought this up, but I also don't want to cut people off at the knees. So I'm looking for advice on what's a nice measure to say we're moving in the right direction without people going, are you kidding me?
Sorry, Tasha Fuson for the record. I appreciate you pointing that out, Trustee Castillo, but I think what needs to be understood is when the state refers to a 10% increase or 10% decrease, they're not just adding 10% to it. So if you have a 45% proficiency rate, a 10% increase is now not 55%. It's, if you have 45%, 10% of that 45% is 4.5%. So now you're trying to get to 49.5%. So that's how the state calculates either 10% decreases or 10% increases. It's not just adding 10% on. So that might help.
Thank you. That's good clarification. So my question is still the same, and it's just not to be answered now, but is that realistically attainable, or is that lofty?
So that's, well, I do think it's lofty, but it's also based on our state goals. So within the Nevada School Performance Framework that our schools are held accountable for, they're in the state's plan, they have what they call point attribution tables, and it says like, okay, this is where your baseline is for this year. You were expected to hit this, like if it's 23%, but the state's goal is 45%, and we're this far below the state's goal of 45%, there's a fail-safe that if you decrease, and we can actually change the verbiage on that, because I flipped it. I told AJ I had it as in decreasing by 10% versus increasing, but I thought our community might not understand the decrease in non-proficient as easily as an increase in proficient. But that's based on that fail-safe. So if you don't meet the state's goal, but you have that 10% shift, and again, not adding 10% to the base number, but the 10%, then you meet basically a safety net that because it's either this or 10%. So that is what we would expect of all of our schools to hit that goal in order to meet the state's requirement for them to make sufficient progress, if that makes sense. So in some cases, it does seem lofty, but I don't want to set a lower bar for our schools than what we're required to meet by the states.
So are these percentages requirements from the state?
So those are our current, those are our actual current percentages of proficient students as shown on the Nevada School Report or the Nevada Report Card website. So that's another reason we kind of looked at that as a metric. It's easy for you as board members, but any of our stakeholders to actually track if they want to. So every year when we submit our school district's data and the data for each one of our sites, it goes onto the Nevada Report Card. You can pull up each one of our schools and or just our district as a whole, and it shows you how many students that we have that are considered proficient at each of the 3 levels. So that baseline data that is in here is exactly where we're at today. So for next year, when we're looking at our state account or our district accountability and for our schools accountability, we will have to decrease the number of non-proficient students by at least 10% or meet the state's goals. Now understand that the state's goals change every single year. They raise the bar every year. So that's what I mean by point attribution tables. They literally publish, it's like a 78, 80-page document that has, here's every indicator that every one of our schools is being held accountable for, that then those points get added up, and that determines whether you're a 1-star school, 2-star school, 3-star school, et cetera. And at the back of that, these lovely appendices tells you for this indicator, this is the goal for this year, which is changes every single year. I mean, it goes across, it's a table. So your goal changes every single year, but the one constant is if you don't hit that, at least if you have a 10% decrease in non-proficiency, then you get your full points, if you will. So I think it's a very important that if we're going to hold our schools accountable, and I think that goes back to what Trustee Walker was saying, we want to not create so many goals that they're trying to reach that they lose sight on what it is that they need to do. So this was a way, all of these metrics under goal 2 were a way to say, these are what's required of us as a district under the Nevada School Performance Framework. This is how our schools are judged, and ergo how we are judged as a district to meet these goals. If we meet these goals, then we will get we'll get awarded the points for those particular categories. Chronic absentee is one of them that you don't see represented in here. But right now, just so you know, our schools are being like destroyed by their chronic absenteeism points, right? Like many of our schools are getting 1 out of 10 points on that area. So it's harsh. So anyways, it's just trying to align this. And then this is the first year that we're gonna have to write a district performance plan. AJ has mentioned that to you all before as well. And that district performance plan has to be written in alignment with the governor's new accountability measures that he's put out for districts that AJ was talking about earlier. So these are also taking that into consideration, because it's for our school sites, we need to think smart, not hard. That's what you're trying to say, Trustee
What I'm
Walker.
trying to say, and I think that one of the things that I think is going to benefit us with a strategic plan like this, you know, in that whole discussion about truancy, I was kind of biting the inside of my cheek, because the fact is, since COVID, perceptions about school attendance have changed. And not only have those perceptions changed, laws and rules have changed. And so the way absences are excused, and even excused absences, a family could excuse absences, those still count against the school. The other thing is we're still dealing with COVID. And if a child gets COVID, they're out 5 days from day 0. So, I mean, there's all these factors that we're still dealing with. What I think it's going to help us having something like a strategic plan like this, where we are engaging with the community, we can start to address those concerns and hopefully change that perception about the importance of school attendance. And, you know, until people realize, you know, it's almost like punishing schools for things that they can't control. And so it's, you know, this gives us an avenue in with the community to say, listen, we understand things happen, but number one, your child's education is super important. If they miss a school day, it's not like you just come the next day and you get that same thing and then more. You know what I mean? You become behind. And so then you have to get caught up what you missed after you've gotten that next day's lesson. And so this gives us that opportunity to really engage with families, to say, this is what these star ratings mean. And that's challenging. And so I think that having stuff like this, where we're really engaging with the community, educating, building a partnership to say, listen, this is what's looked at, this is what's important to the state, how can we do this together? And you know, not a lot of places have a real robust strategic plan. You know, when we go to NASB meetings and we talk to trustees in other districts, they're amazed that we actually have these, you know, community engagement events. So, I mean, I think that we're in a good spot to build partnerships and to really, you know, get the help from the community that we need.
I'm just going to make a comment on the attendance too, because I think, like you said, there's been a shift in how people view attendance. I think there's been a shift in parents not sending kids to school sick. It used to be kids went to school a lot of times when they were sick, and I think people are more cautious about that now. And you can have strep throat, the flu, or a variety of different things that add up those illnesses and those absences quickly. So at what point is the state going to recognize the shift that is taking place, where people are trying to prevent sickness and trying to keep sick kids, you know, give sick kids a chance to get better? And I worry about that requiring a medical a doctor's note for all of those medical absences, because sometimes, I mean, my kids would run fevers, but there was nothing that a doctor would do because it's a virus. And then if you don't have access to a physician or a primary care provider to give you that medical note, then we're hurting those families that are, I don't know. And I realize this isn't this, I'm kind of having a little thought on this.
I'm gonna
but
actually
I think it's
add to
something
that,
we
though.
struggle with.
The fact is, I wish it was just absences because of illness. That would be lovely. Honestly, one of the bigger challenges that our schools are reporting right now is because we got so good at remote education and Google Classroom and accessibility. We've seen an extreme uptick in people taking their parents taking their students out of school to travel, and they're just absolutely floored that they can't go on a 2 or 3 week road trip but I have my Chromebook and my teacher uses Google Classroom and I have all my digital resources and we can absolutely be successful on our little road trip. Okay, so yay, we've done a great job of doing that, but that's still absences, and the mechanism for calculating attendance or average daily attendance doesn't take that into consideration. So it's still an absence. Even if it's an excused absence, it still is a chronic absenteeism. Any student who misses more than 10% of the time that they're enrolled, regardless if they're a straight A student in all dual credit classes, they are still a chronic absent student. So that is a real hardship that we're seeing when it comes to that. Like I said, if it was just illness, that'd be one thing, but it's not. It's the mobility of folks now that's contributing.
Trustee Walt.
On another note, I don't know if it's a typo because I'm not quite sure how this would be achievable. But on goal 3, the first box, success standards, increase the ratio of total, district volunteers, fine, but total student enrollment by 5% per year? How do you do that if our population, as we've been hearing, is not families?
So this may be one that we look at again, ultimately, but I think if we're looking at I guess my concern with this is, so we can easily capture how many volunteers we have because they have to go through this Raptor system that we've talked about before, like that does the background checks and those sorts of things. So I know how many volunteers we have in the district at any given time. I know how many students I have at any given time. And I didn't want to just say increase the number of volunteers by 5% per year. No, and I'm not sure if 5% is entirely reasonable or not, but knowing that if our enrollment is falling, we likely there's going to be some reflection in the number of volunteers we have, right? If I have fewer students overall in the district, I have fewer potential volunteers, right? Parents in the district. Mm-hmm. And so this kind of helps hopefully keep true to a percentage of the total district enrollment. But bottom line, we want more volunteers. And so
that I get. I just didn't get the student enrollment by 5%.
It was a division thing. It's the volunteers divided by the student enrollment.
Oh, I thought it was twofold.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, I had to look at that again.
Yeah.
I was like,
yeah, that's okay. Got it. Now I get it. It's a division sign.
Yeah, sorry.
Mathematical. I didn't get that.
This is what I was talking about. It's very technical. It's almost like just track it. How many parent volunteers? You know what I'm saying?
Is it increasing?
10%, like increase whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, but he's a numbers guy, you guys, right?
So I will take that under advisement as we move through this process.
Richard used to say, "I service your pleasure."
Well, you could learn your lesson by giving that job to Dan Sadler, because I don't think Dan's quite the numbers guy you are, so
We'll get him there.
So is this something that we're ready as a board to take action on, or do we want to see some corrections and bring it back again? Would be my question.
I feel like we've talked about it a few times. It's time to get going.
Yeah. And my feeling, if we all recognize it's a living document, that you're going to revise along the way, you're going to come back to us and say, yeah, this turns out we achieved this, or hey, this is a bit lofty, or hey, this is really a headache to track. And what are we getting out of it? You know, we got to be willing to listen to and be willing to make some adjustments to it. So in that regard, it's a place to start.
It's a place to start, but also we have to remember that it's a strategic plan for the education system of the community. The interests and the concerns of the community are going to shift from year to year, election to election, and so we have to be flexible.
Okay, go ahead.
I move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees approve the revisions to the Carson City School District Strategic Plan, Empower Carson City 2027 as submitted.
Second it.
We have a motion by trustee Cassiopo and a second by trustee Varner. Is there any further comment from board members or questions? Seeing none, any public comment? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion is approved. Thank you very much. We will move on to agenda item 14, which is approval of consent agenda for possible action. Okay, motion, okay, well, sorry, trustee, okay, I'll put trustee Walt because you didn't have your microphone on. So we have a motion by trustee Walker, a second by trustee Walt. Do we have any further questions?
What does that say about me? Because I didn't have mine on either.
Your voice was louder. That's the administrator.
In my defense, so I'm sitting by somebody who got marked out as truant. I got somebody that might be. This is a tough crowd to be a part of.
Okay, do we have any further discussion or comments on the motion? Do we have any public comment? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye, motion is approved. We'll move to agenda item 15, which is informational updates for discussion only. No action will be taken. Do we have any questions on our informational items? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to agenda item 16, request for future agenda topics. Trustee Varner.
I know that the star ratings for the schools just recently came out. Is that correct? Could we get an update on those, the next meeting maybe, or a future meeting?
Okay. Do we have any other requests for future agenda topics? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item 17, adjournment. And it's still before 10 o'clock, guys, so